Tyne was an ordinary nerd, completely absorbed in webtoons and internet culture. Until one day, everything changed. The gates opened, monsters poured out, and humanity staggered on the brink of annihilation. But unlike everyone else, Tyne didn't feel fear, he felt a surge of excitement, as if he had been thrown directly into one of his favorite webtoons. What usually happens at this stage is very predictable. Humans choose superpowers or receive magical abilities to fight the monsters. This is the standard narrative. Our protagonist thinks this while staring intently at his phone screen, which shows exactly what he just described. At that moment, a strong light begins to emanate from the screen. He also thought that the same thing would happen to him. The only problem is that out of the entire world, he was the only one chosen, and there is a massive horde of monsters that needs to be destroyed. As if the workload overload and normal life weren't enough. Now, in addition, he has to be the only worker. To understand how we got to this point, we have to go back in time. Baeon is a completely normal person, literally the average citizen, another one without remarkable qualities. Since his self-esteem is not very high, it is more accurate to describe him as a total loser, being a completely average person. He liked to spend his free time reading webtoons. The series he follows weekly is very good, and Baeon also keeps up with the latest releases in this area. He always makes sure to leave his opinion when the works are good. At this moment, he is deeply involved in doing exactly that, and he ended up bumping into a classmate for not looking ahead. His first instinct was to apologize for what happened, but the girl scolded him, telling him he should look ahead while walking. The funny thing is that she is also holding a phone, as if he were the only distracted one. With a disdainful look in her eyes, she looks at our protagonist with disgust, then continues on her way without a second look. Unfortunately, this poor man is completely in love with her. In his head, he is practically her boyfriend, only she doesn't know it yet, until his distraction is suddenly interrupted by a slap on the head from a guy whom The look on our protagonist's face bothered him, and although that is wrong, you can't exactly blame the guy. The expression was horrible. The brute ordered him to stop looking at the girl like that. He is the typical rich jerk, and to top it off, our protagonist's father works for his father. The boy ends up apologizing, realizing that the villains in the stories he usually reads are much worse. It was then that a horrifying nightmare creature appeared in the hallway. Something completely surreal, even without knowing its origin. Just by looking into its eyes, one thing was clear. If 100 men cannot defeat a gorilla, imagine trying to fight this demon. Trying to make sense of the situation, our boy felt something sneak into his underwear. That creature looked like a king taken straight out of a fantasy tale. And the strangest thing is that this excited the boy. Since these types of monsters are usually used to show the protagonist's power, this boy has serious problems. Seriously, he is waiting for a supporting character to appear and help him. If it were me, I would have already broken the 100-meter sprint record. And that's it. The boy's sanity was erased. Now he believes he will even get a magical partner to save him, at least in S1 rank. Near him lies the body of the rich jerk slumped on the floor. The first to receive a tender session from the creature, it is then that the protagonist realizes what might be happening. An opportunity to reveal his protagonist role and save the one who tormented him at school. The creature tried to attack the student, but he managed to dodge the blow. Meanwhile, our protagonist keeps going over the situation, unsure how to intervene. It was then that the system window appeared, informing him that he had been chosen. Everything was falling into place. His status window was exactly what he needed at that moment. Meanwhile, the rich kid keeps begging for help, and our protagonist tells him he will save him soon. Right after awakening his powers, the system told him he would train for the next 6,666 years in another dimension, and that if he reached the end of the tower, he would obtain divine powers and become the savior of humanity. But the boy doesn't want to waste time reading all that. He wants to receive the benefits immediately. Meanwhile, the rich kid does everything possible to survive. Reformulating the message, the system asks him if he wants to go up the tower for the next 666 years to become super strong. And the boy accepted immediately. If he accepts, he must choose his ability to use. While our protagonist wastes time reading all this, the rich kid is about to become the creature's snack. The system said he could choose any ability he wanted, which left the boy extremely undecided, confirming the boy's suspicions. The system said he could choose a power to save another world. He could become a decanter and lead his own army, or wield the most powerful mystical object of all. As long as he can imagine it, it will be completely possible. But the Tower of Trials is not something easy to conquer. It has over 60,000 floors, and the boy has 1 year to overcome it. Either he reaches the end or dies trying. After absorbing all this information, he began to think even more. Now he is not sure whether to choose an ability or an object. At this point, the rich kid started reminding him that he had promised to help him soon. But our protagonist asked him to be a little more patient because he had finally reached a conclusion, and he pressed a button on the system's screen with his finger. It was time to tell the system what ability he had chosen. There is a lot of suspense in our protagonist's eyes as he prepares to reveal something surprising. He asked for a ticket that would transport him directly to the last floor of the trial tower. Something so unexpected and strange, and at the same time so brilliantly intelligent that even the creature stopped doing what it most desired. Not only the monster, the system itself was also confused by it, and the boy remembered that the system's own rules stated that he could choose an object or an ability, worried about the consequences. The system said that skipping the rules was one thing, but this was skipping them completely. But faced with that explanation, the boy got even angrier, claiming that the system was just deceiving people, since there was no other way. The system decided to give the ticket to the protagonist, and it really worked. The system said that by being transported to the last floor, he would receive all the rewards that entails. Next, it asks him if he wants to use the item. Now, something that our protagonist immediately confirmed, and that small piece of paper began to shine brighter. And more, a light so intense that it completely distracted both the rich kid and the creature that wanted to devour him. Moments ago, the boy's body was now enveloped in a mysterious glow. A glow so powerful that it seemed the entire school building was shining too. For a brief moment, Earth became the brightest place in the galaxy, like a star looking at his empty hands. Our protagonist wondered if it really worked, until the system started congratulating him for reaching the end of the trial tower. It was time for him to receive his reward. Our boy received SSS-level superpowers and abilities. He had exceeded the limits of humanity. Several notifications appeared around him. Everything that could be maximized was now at its highest level, and the boy's body returned to the school, shining even brighter. In the blink of an eye, a huge transformation had occurred. He was no longer a loser. The boy's body radiated energy, and that dangerous creature realized that the tables had turned. The rich kid was also stunned, noticing how drastically the boy's appearance had improved. Seeing that the creature hesitated, our protagonist asked him if he was going to stand there watching because it was time for him to enter him. The poor monster remained deeply worried. He looked at the rich kid for comfort. Tarost simply pointed at our protagonist. It was then that the creature realized that, in the grand scheme of things, it still had to fulfill its purpose. It charged towards our protagonist, fully convinced that nothing would happen. The boy felt like everything was going too slowly. He decided to make the most of his first combat opportunity, choosing to finish off the creature with a simple movement of his fingers, which he did immediately, causing another burst of intense light in that hallway, as if the atoms were undergoing nuclear fission. A completely overwhelming power was now at his fingertips, and something totally destructive was happening inside that school. The resulting energy was completely annihilative. It was not confined to Earth's atmosphere. It found its way into the vastness of space, a beam of energy so powerful it could destroy everything in its path. We finally understand what happened on Earth, a trail of destruction left behind by that power, and the poor creature that no longer exists. All that raw power went far beyond what our protagonist had originally intended. It was then that the system appeared. The time had come again to calculate the rewards. Due to his exceptional stats, he broke multiple records, obtaining even greater rewards. He never imagined that asking for such a ticket would lead him to all this. The system reported that the total casualties caused by the attack amounted to 2 billion lives. The rich kid was still there, realizing that the monster that had been annihilated was just an ant in the presence of the real monster, trying to pull himself together. He asked him what had just happened, and our boy replied that he was being too formal, until he decided to concentrate and use a powerful magic he had learned from all this. At SSS level, the temporal regression skill was activating. Our boy was doing this to return things to their original state, with the intention of reversing the damage caused by his powerful attack. The energy he had released was gradually returning, not just the energy. The gears of reality itself began to turn in reverse, back to the moment the boy decided to launch that attack with his fingertips. He was almost at the starting point, until finally, his ability managed to send him to the desired moment, where he came face to face with that threatening creature. It was then that he realized that no matter how dangerous, the monster was deeply terrified, putting its hands on its head. Our boy felt relieved that it had worked, and apologized for scaring the creature. It was his first time with so much power, as he reflected on the magnitude of everything he had received. The poor creature tried to escape quietly through the hole in the wall. That's why our protagonist asked where it was going using the imprisonment ability. The idea of killing the creature twice made him feel bad, so the boy needed to think of something else. Taking the opportunity, our protagonist asked him if the rich kid hadn't told him to go buy bread. The jerk changed his mind instantly, saying he would go buy it himself, and he started apologizing for everything he had done. But our protagonist was still quite threatening, telling the boy to wait a moment, since there was still something to do. Outside, several creatures were destroying the city, and the rich kid realized how truly terrifying the situation in the city was. The fear he felt seeing all that was genuine and creeping up to the protagonist's feet. He started begging for help, but our boy was busy and told him to wait a little. And the rich kid said that saving everyone at the school was more important. Only then did our boy say that saving his family was more important than other lives. It's a completely reasonable stance, and the rich kid understood it perfectly. Our boy was using an A-rank transport skill, disappearing from inside the school in a blink and closing of eyes. A man was lying on a very comfortable bed, the perfect nap taken right after lunch, sleeping so deeply that not even the end of the world could wake him up. That's what our protagonist's parents were watching on television. His mother was impressed by how clean a bachelor's room could be, while his father wished he could star in that scene during his break, sleeping peacefully. It was then that the program was interrupted by an emergency broadcast. The capital of Korea was being attacked by monsters, and citizens were advised to remain vigilant. This horrified the couple, and the phone resting on the table began to ring. Determined to check what was happening, the couple approached the window and realized that the news was true. The world was being destroyed by terrifying creatures. The sight filled them with dread. Such a scenario should have been impossible to even imagine, and upon revealing themselves, they ended up attracting the attention of one of the monsters, which then directed all its aggressiveness towards them. The entire apartment was about to be destroyed by a single blow from the creature. It was then that our protagonist appeared behind the monster, asking it what it was doing. Using a gravity inversion skill, our protagonist was ready to teach that creature a lesson. To activate the magic, he needed to select a target object. Before the monster could understand what was happening, its body began to levitate, ascending towards the sky like a fallen one, but in reverse. Now our protagonist's parents were completely safe. The problem was that they hadn't expected to see their son levitating in the air, passing through the window, as if he were made of nothing. He confirmed that it was really their son, but the couple's disbelief remained immense. Too many things were happening at once. It was then that his father asked him why he wasn't at school, and also shouldn't he know not to enter the house with shoes on. And our son replied that none of that mattered now. But his parents disagreed. That the world was in chaos didn't mean he shouldn't go to school or respect the house rules. So taking off the shoes he was wearing, he acknowledged that his parents must have worked very hard to raise him for the past 16 years. After all, he never let go of his phone, not even for a moment, and he knew that worried his parents. And now they didn't have to worry about anything, because he had been chosen as the savior of humanity. All that speech only worried his parents more, who realized that reading all that nonsense had melted the boy's brain. Our protagonist revealed that he had always thought about that. The protagonist and the stories he followed always managed to handle several things at once, and he deeply admired that kind of attitude. But there was one thing that always made him think. Those stories always started the same way. The protagonist had some kind of apocalypse. Sometimes he returned in time. There was always a common motivation, revealed knowledge of the future, a well-drawn best friend to make life brighter. Those protagonists never thought about the families they had. That is something our boy will never overlook, blessing his parents with several abilities. Even after all that talk, the boy's father is old school, asking once again what kind of nonsense he is talking about. So our protagonist protecting the family he has comes before everything else, using a massive area spell to protect that entire region, in absolute defense. And impenetrable. That should be more than enough to guarantee their safety. The monsters won't be able to lay a single finger on his parents. Finally, the boy could dedicate himself to saving the rest of the world, but his parents insisted on asking him once again what the hell he was doing. Saying goodbye to them. He told them he loved them very much, and a great light appeared again in that room. For now, they had no answer. They said they loved the boy very much too. Outside the school building, some things were destroyed. Our protagonist had returned to where he was, and the rich kid, showing extreme subservience, asked if the boy's parents were okay, and our protagonist said yes. That left his former tormentor quite relieved. Now they can go back to the topic of bread. Because our protagonist hadn't forgotten about him, and he ended up apologizing for bringing up the topic again. It's just that it's stronger than him, as a former victim of that kind of treatment. It was time for our protagonist to teach that jerk a lesson, using a huge spell. He set out to perform a grand summoning, leaving the poor guy terrified, with a cold look and psychotic expression on his face. He asked the rich kid if he really liked hamburger buns, because now he was going to eat them until he was completely full. So many hamburgers appeared in that place that the poor bully ended up buried. He barely managed to escape the mountain of hamburgers that had been summoned. After all of them were summoned, the bully managed to get up, but our protagonist was dazed, and he thought that he realized that the guy was extremely weak, which negatively surprised him. He had expected a bit more. The rich kid began to feel intimidated by that judgment, and wondered if things really had to go that far. Since he had never done anything that bad to him, our protagonist realized that he hadn't shown enough yet. Leaving the rich kid even more terrified, it was time to show him a little flashback. That left the bully very surprised, as he didn't know he had done so wrong. It was time to remember everything that had happened. Because our protagonist remembered everything, even when he mockingly laughed at that despicable creature, or the time he burned his entire school uniform. There was even a day when our boy had to eat his lunch after being submerged in a toilet every day. He was consumed by an enormous feeling of helplessness. Once his glasses were locked with a padlock, and apparently that bully remembered none of that. He admitted to telling the boy to buy bread, but he didn't remember the rest of the stories, especially since our protagonist wasn't even wearing glasses. Now even more threatening. The boy asked if the bully was saying he was lying, but against all odds, the bully stood by his word. That was enough for our boy. He would accept those apologies, and as a gesture of the good relationship they would have from now on, he transformed the boy into something he desired. The first possibility the bully considered was having a body sculpted purely by sumo, which was more than enough for our protagonist to use his transformation ability. A green mist enveloped the boy's body, and the transformation occurred. Finally, the mist dissipated, but there was no muscular body there, much to the bully's surprise. He had turned into a hamburger. He was absolutely outraged. While our protagonist laughed at the scene, he said that if the guy regretted what he had done, he could return him to normal, leaving the little hamburger terrified. But their conversation was suddenly interrupted by a female voice. It was that girl who had looked at our protagonist like he was trash. She soon realized who had arrived. She told him he had been chosen by the gods, while the little hamburger kept begging for his original form back. The girl was terrified when she realized the hamburger was talking. Our protagonist told her she was very cute and offered her a bite. Only then did she put her hand on her chest, as if breathless, asking if our protagonist wasn't scared, because the whole world had changed drastically. A lot of people must have died, and for some unknown reason, there was no one at the school. And all communication had stopped. She couldn't call the police. Not knowing what was happening terrified her, and she couldn't understand how our protagonist could be so cheerful. She said this with tears in her eyes. That caused a strong reaction in our protagonist. He asked her if she really didn't have the habit of reading any kind of story. He said they were very fun, and the reason there was no one else was because the author of this story was lazy, and he didn't want to draw any more characters. And honestly, he was right. But the girl asked what he meant to our protagonist. This was problematic. He realized that he lacked a sense of romance, which only left the girl even more confused. Putting his hands on his head, Our protagonist began to deeply regret. A human sandwich suggested he return things to normal, while our boy considered the possibility of bringing another woman to take the female protagonist's role. He decided to do exactly that, search across all dimensions using an SSS-level summoning ability. That would bring him the most suitable female character for that role. A huge magic circle appeared on the floor of that place. This left the girl absolutely terrified, as she had no idea what was happening. Our protagonist asked for the most beautiful and charming woman from all dimensions. The brightness of his magic was so intense that it even blinded the eyes of the creatures on the street. Once the ability was used, a thick fog formed in the hallway, returning to its usual self. A human hamburger asked what that pervert had just done. Our protagonist started sweating cold. Indeed, before his eyes was a woman. In one of her hands, she held a blood-stained sword. Although her face was beautiful, her gaze was threatening. Now a completely unknown girl had appeared in that school, and it seemed like she had just escaped a dangerous situation. Our protagonist was stunned, and the human hamburger was completely smitten. That girl didn't know what had happened, but she was sure she had just stabbed Jermaine with her own hands. She looked like the standard character in a romance where the heroine seduces a tyrant to a villain and she becomes the villain in his place. That guy had a lot of nerve. The first time he saw her, he treated her with total nonchalance. It was the first time that happened to her, since she was the heiress of the Libertin house, but our protagonist immediately cut off her explanation. She was not allowed to change the genre of the story like that, so he asked her if Layla understood how important the first 3 chapters in a webtoon were. And as a reference, they had just entered chapter 3. If she insisted on explaining her background story, they would now be stuck in that school hallway for several episodes, and the readers would think the story's pacing was too slow. The girl ignored him and continued to explain where she came from, but our protagonist was annoyed that she was giving too much background on something irrelevant, until she said that the boy was ill-mannered for raising his voice at her, even though they didn't know each other. Our boy is not exactly an avid reader of romantic fantasy, and the silver-haired girl wanted to know where she was, and why the other girl was wearing such strange clothes, because a few moments ago, she was sure she had been lovingly stabbing her husband with that dagger. With a simple movement of his fingers, our protagonist made the bloody weapon disappear. He said he would do the same with her clothes, making the new female character look completely impeccable. That was simply inexplicable, said both the other girl and the human sandwich. Then once again, the silver-haired girl asked who our protagonist was. But at that moment, he completely ignored her because he felt something approaching. Using his newly acquired power, he created a protective barrier, preventing a powerful attack from destroying the school. While he was distracted arguing, a creature as large as the building had dangerously approached, leaving those inside completely terrified. The silver-haired girl was confused. She didn't even know what world this was. Inside the barrier, our protagonist watched as the monster unleashed a series of attacks. That only made his anger grow more and more. Our protagonist soon realized that the creature was incredibly stupid, with a high probability of being mentally deficient. This was the perfect opportunity for him to warm up. With the help of the system, he controlled his strength better to avoid another disaster. Using one of his many abilities, he prepared an electric sting to finish off the creature, revealing to it that the power he possessed was many times superior to everything that existed on that land. After that brutal display of power, the group of girls was impressed. After all, it was truly amazing, and at the same time, completely incredible. Our protagonist didn't think the situation was anything special. As long as he was having fun, nothing else mattered. This time, he used ice magic to attack the creatures, which left the squadron of girls even more terrified. A low-level spell was enough to completely freeze all those monsters. Now that the creatures were paralyzed, he had the opportunity to step on them as if they were insects. The impact of his stomps completely broke those ice blocks, scattering pieces of the creatures throughout the city. After this brief interaction, he managed to eradicate the monsters near the school, realizing that he might have gotten a little carried away in the process. He had to significantly limit his power. Still, the result was devastating. Knowing that he had become extremely powerful made our protagonist truly happy. It was then that the system notified him that he had defeated his first enemy. As soon as the system screen disappeared, several other monsters appeared in his location. That was perfect for him. A fusion between a fantasy world and a world of awakened hunters. One of the abilities he possessed was flight, which he now used to fight the monsters. He was also able to materialize a sword made of psionic energy, piercing the monsters as if nothing. Our protagonist easily pierced them, leaving a huge trail of bodies behind him, and monster parts flying through the air. He did all this while heading towards the largest one, a dangerous and brutal dragon. But even that creature was weak compared to the power he possessed. He finally realized that the monsters were emerging from a single portal, and he needed to do something about it. At first glance, the simplest way to solve the situation was to go through the portal and clear the dungeon, but our boy was full of absurd abilities. One of them was dimensional banishment. He didn't need to bother doing the work. The creatures quickly realized what he was capable of. The fear they began to feel was so intense that they stopped advancing. But they couldn't do anything anymore. The banishment ability was already in motion. In this way, our protagonist would eliminate the very existence of the portal, while sending it to an even greater portal. A huge void appeared in the sky where the dimensional rift had been, sighing in relief. He realized that this would keep the city safe for a while, having resolved everything outside. He used teleportation to return to the school. As soon as he returned to the hallway, he saw the two girls chatting calmly with the human hamburger. The silver-haired girl noticed his return and told him that while our protagonist was away, she had been talking to others to learn about this world, realizing that somehow she had time-traveled into the future. Indeed, there were many differences between her reality and this one. Our protagonist explained that he hadn't exactly time-traveled, but that he would help her adapt to this new world, using his transformation ability. The goal was to change her clothes to make the illustrator's job easier, who had already suffered enough drawing those short fight scenes. When the glow enveloped the silver-haired girl's body, she was quite impressed. Her body revealed such beauty that the human hamburger completely lost control. The girl was truly ashamed. The outfit was too revealing. She asked for a dress or something more appropriate immediately. Our boy also tied up her hair to make the illustration easier, with a level of disdain beyond the measurable scale. The other girl said she never imagined she would meet someone with such disgusting tastes. Our protagonist asked her to avoid using such offensive words, saying he had carefully chosen something comfortable, although he admitted that the shorts might be a little too short. Just when it seemed he was going to change her outfit, the human hamburger begged him earnestly not to. Our protagonist ignored him, and to the displeasure and suffering of that poor sandwich. The girl was now wearing pants, trying to take advantage of that ability for herself. The school bestie asked him if he could create designer clothes. Our boy never imagined she was like this. While they were talking, the silver-haired girl brought up a completely irrelevant detail. Her last name was no longer Libertin. It was now Klesuch, a noble surname since she had become a princess. But our protagonist was completely lost in the beauty of her hair. Unfortunately, many things had happened in her life, for all intents and purposes. She had ended her husband's life and future heir, and our protagonist kept insisting he didn't want to know her background story, saying that everything she said made no sense. However, he realized that she must have lived a tragic and painful life. It was the first time he showed empathy towards her. Our boy admitted that he didn't want to know the details, assuming she must be suffering from some kind of terminal illness, which surprised the girl because that was exactly the case, and that was not all. Her marriage had clearly been arranged with someone she never loved. She had most likely been betrayed, with one of the maids falsely accused of something. She became the villain of that narrative. In the midst of that misunderstanding, an accident occurred. With tears in her eyes, the silver-haired girl revealed that this was the pure truth. Our protagonist knew she had suffered a lot, but she no longer needed to carry that burden. Here, the girl was still struggling to process everything. Our protagonist stated that she had done everything in self-defense. He blessed the girl's body with an S-rank blessing, saying that she had done nothing wrong. That gave her a pleasant feeling. Our protagonist said that all the illnesses in her body had been cured. She no longer suffered from that illness. Now she could live as she wished in this new world. It was the first time she had heard anything like that. Not even from her father, who was a very powerful man, or her most admired friend. Not even from her fiancé, who was a despicable person. None of them gave her freedom. And now she had received this wonderful gift from a man she had just met. As the protagonist of a ridiculous and meaningless romance, she was not only grateful. She was clearly interested in the boy, and our protagonist realized that something else was going on. It was then that the system interrupted to report the number of monsters defeated, which triggered a new achievement, which was also a sign that her story had only just begun. The system said that the boy had attracted the attention of the constellations, pleasing these entities. He could receive exclusive abilities, sponsorships, and items. Our boy got lost in the sea of messages he was receiving. Several constellations were very interested in him, but it seemed he was not interested in any of them. He asked the system to block all those entities. Given the protagonist's indifference, the system asked him why he was rejecting such good opportunities. And our boy said he didn't like that kind of thing. The system insisted on continuing the conversation, but our protagonist simply ignored the screen, focusing completely on the people who were there with him. He asked them if they were interested in joining him to save the world. While they were having that conversation, the Celestial Council of Constellations had gathered. Several entities from another dimension were observing Earth. One of them was furious. A mere mortal had rejected the favor of a constellation. He was the representative of anger. Another entity said it was getting very entertaining. He was the representative of games. Meanwhile, the one representing cooking believed it was time to teach the boy a lesson. Then one wearing a crown on his head asked everyone to remain calm. He was the king of all constellations, even though that being was nothing more than a human. He had gone through the Tower of Trials and deserved their respect. The constellation of Despair said it was impossible, as he was only human. Meanwhile, the constellation of Envy claimed that the boy had jumped on all fours, requesting that he be sent to their dimension. They wanted to know if the boy had the potential to alter the order of the universe. And if that was confirmed, they would destroy the boy with their own hands. Finally, he had distributed all the power he possessed. Now his companions could destroy those monsters as they wished, except for the human sandwich, who was quite upset. In fact, the girls were also upset. They didn't want to fight those terrifying creatures either, trying to calm them down. He told them they were now his companions and were protected by the superpower of the plot. They couldn't die. The schoolgirl said that the protagonist could do all that alone. He replied that she was ignoring the obvious, even if he is capable of doing everything. Doing it alone is not fun at all. At that moment, a creature tries to ambush him from behind, but it doesn't even manage to touch him. Bouncing off his barrier, the more powerful the protagonist of a story, the more interesting the narrative of the secondary characters becomes. A schoolgirl still doesn't understand what he means, while the transmigrated girl seems to have understood something. She asked if it was really necessary to eliminate the monsters to save this world. She had already taken the life of her own husband, who was the natural heir to the crown. Now she felt capable of finishing off anything, leaving her other companions slightly uneasy about her attitude. Immediately, she heads towards the first monster that tries to approach. To make this story even more interesting, our protagonist will do everything in his power. The first step is to form a team, and the role of the transmigrated girl has just been defined by him. Using the malice hidden in her heart, she began to unleash multiple blows, turning that huge creature into several small pieces. It gave her a suspicious feeling of freedom. On a man's face, that expression would look unhinged. She is a dagger assassin. The school rule asked why that woman was so terrifying, while our protagonist was happy to already have such a well-defined character. All those were feelings the dagger assassin had never experienced before. While she was lost in thought, a creature tried to ambush her from behind, managing to grab her with its tentacles. Danger is imminent. The sandwich boy worried, and the other girl realized they needed to act quickly. A sandwich didn't hesitate to save that girl, and our protagonist encouraged him to do so, while calling the sandwich boy the beating. This is another character whose story is being forged. His eyes shine bright with the determination of someone easily seduced by beautiful women. He forcefully struck the creature with his bread body. The beat-down sandwich didn't want his ability to be so trivial. He had become the team's mascot. In the end, he expressed his protest to the protagonist. Beat-down sandwich asked to receive something cooler, but the dagger assassin thanked him. He tried to use the charm that only a sandwich could have. He said he would do anything for her. Now there is only one person left, but the school rule is still extremely scared, unsure why she should be doing any of this. To maintain the flow, our protagonist suggested that she also show the ability she had received, but she was too scared and didn't want to do it. She told him that he was powerful enough to go back in time, and that he had been personally chosen by God, and that he must fix everything before the world sinks into chaos. The lives of ordinary people are falling apart, and some are on the verge of death at any moment. Fun shouldn't be that important, completely contradicting the girl's reasonable opinion. Our protagonist said that fun is fundamental. It doesn't matter that we move forward. And someday she would understand the truth behind those words, because in this new world, fun has become the most important thing. It was then that he realized that the atmosphere of the place had completely changed. Until the boy asked her to look behind her, because a dangerous creature was approaching quickly. He recommended that she defeat that monster using the magic she had received. Not knowing exactly what she was doing, she began to swing her staff with her eyes closed. She decided to use it like a club, hitting the creature full on as if it were a baseball, leaving all witnesses slightly impressed. The result of her actions turned the creature into jelly. The girl found it disgusting because she is the strong warrior. The mascot said her stance was the same as a baseball player, and the girl revealed that she used to play when she was younger. Our protagonist did not expect her to become that kind of character. It was then that he felt a presence behind him. He demanded that he act more seriously. That power definitely didn't seem like the work of an ordinary monster, and a figure revealed himself to the group, saying he was impressed that our protagonist had been able to interfere with his power, and he had done it with his own hands. It was then that our protagonist realized that it could only mean one thing, that this mysterious man is impressed that there are strong people in that place. Even though this situation is dangerous, our protagonist is completely excited by the existence of this demon-like person. The man didn't expect the boy to know about his identity. Our protagonist said he is a big fan. He never imagined he was real. It is then that the girl asks him what's wrong with him and who this mysterious person is. And our protagonist breaks the fourth wall, once again suggesting we watch the story called Chiam, whose protagonist is a grandmaster of martial arts. In the story, he is a villain, the pinnacle of antagonism. The mysterious man said that our boy talks too much, and asked him if that massive energy from the east belonged to him. That made our protagonist remember what he had done with his fingers. The shockwave was indeed going in that direction, and he admitted that he was responsible for it. Thousand Demons said that humanity had stopped evolving, becoming weak. Even he was losing interest in this world, full of uninteresting people. But that day, things seemed to be changing, as if the truth of the world was being rewritten. Several monsters began to appear everywhere. Thousand Demons saw this as a great opportunity to be happy, enjoying the pleasure that chaos could bring. He was about to fully surrender to this new feeling. It was then that a powerful flash of energy quickly approached his location, different from anything that had appeared. Until now, that energy was definitely powerful, which forced him to raise his most effective barrier. The power passed through him like a runaway train, but Thousand Demons remained intact. Although he protected himself, everything around him was completely erased. And that was not all. Looking back, he saw something even more surprising. He witnessed the world reversing time. Instantly, everything that had been destroyed was coming back. He was sure that it could only be the work of a supreme master. His instinct told him to head towards the source of that power, immediately crossing the oceans. And so he did until he reached our protagonist. Now we realize that the boy only listened to his story because he is a fan of martial arts. When it was the best friend's romantic arc, he skipped it by all means possible. I can't judge, I do the same. The schoolgirl asks how someone in China can also speak Korean, and our protagonist asks for some common sense, telling her to stop demanding rational explanations for everything in this story. Now Thousand Demons has found this unknown master and says he is going to kill our protagonist. He expects it to be an interesting fight, but the boy is still completely in awe of the presence of his idol. Thousand Demons is looking forward to the fun of the death match. Our protagonist team starts to pity this weird man who doesn't know what he's asking for. The martial warrior prepares one of his attacks, sending the destructive palm of the demonic celestial dragon towards our protagonist. A truly devastating attack. The resulting explosion destroyed a large part of the area, but our protagonist managed to dodge it, claiming it was too slow. That caused great surprise in the heart of the mysterious man, who did not expect it. The boy reveals that he always wanted to do that, surprising his opponent from behind. While mocking the dodged attack, He obtained his power through awakening, but he would like to know how this mysterious man became so strong, completely ignoring the fact that they were in a battle. It was then that Thousand Demons politely excused himself. He lost interest in the conflict. He prefers to continue his life, hunting the monsters that have appeared on the land. As he moves away from the protagonist's team, he admits that it has been a complete waste of time, and the mascot suggests that he is fleeing after realizing his technique is useless. Still, he insists that this place has no future. It was then that our protagonist decided to behave more firmly, while gently grabbing the shoulder of a mysterious man. He said he was crossing some lines, and that he should be more respectful when referring to that land. Sensing the protagonist's threatening power, Thousand Demons quickly moved away from the reach of his hand. But he was truly surprised why it should have been impossible. The boy should not have been able to approach him unnoticed. Determined to eliminate this potential threat, Thousand Demons launches a lethal attack towards our protagonist. The boy observes the incoming attack as if it were cheap fireworks and low budget. The stones thrown by that power are already very close to him, and our boy manages to catch the biggest one with his hands. Finally, the impact causes a huge explosion, surrounded by a very dark aura coming from Thousand Demons. Observing all this were the very well-drawn, well-fed, and worried girls about the boy's state of health. That demonic art of Thousand Demons is capable of consuming the very concept of physical space. And from within that mass, our protagonist emerges quite enthusiastic, saying it was incredibly refreshing, which left Thousand Demons speechless. And our boy said that even if he is being inconvenient, he is still really cool. It cannot be denied. The boy is completely amazed by his favorite character and asked him to become his travel companion. A completely archaic proposal, because Thousand Demons is still trying to process that the technique he perfected over centuries didn't work. Completely frustrated and furious, he said that he is the strongest man under the heavens who would never lose to a brat. Hearing him say that he is the strongest man under the heavens offended our protagonist, and he came up with something very fun to do about it. Raising one of his hands, he began to concentrate his power, drawing the attention of Thousand Demons because now he is not going to have a normal life. Our protagonist is going to use his transmogrification ability. A very familiar sensation was felt by the human hamburger, and the man's body in front of them began to be surrounded by a green mist. Trying to understand what it was, the man began to feel uneasy, sensing that it was some kind of cheap trick, until he noticed that his voice had changed. My friend, much more than that had changed, a feat as unexpected as it was shocking. The protagonist's team was speechless, and our protagonist said that he was no longer the strongest man under the heavens, but the most powerful woman under the heavens. At that moment, the one who was once a man is still very confused. The protagonist's friends are upset. The strength warrior is particularly upset, and our boy tries to explain himself. He says that changing the character's gender, for comedic effect, is a very creative narrative element that has recently gone out of fashion. It was then that the warrior began a vigil speech, immediately interrupted by the protagonist saying that his lines could not go beyond 3 sentences, until he was surprised by the character, who used to be a man, now wanting to return to his original form. But all our protagonist does is hit him on the head, thwarting any attempt at resistance. He says it's been a while since he's been hit, but he will be punished again if he keeps acting like this. Our protagonist's team is shocked by this excessive violence against a woman, while the hamburger man wishes to return to normal. After educating that person, our boy believes his team is now complete. Chayama, who is the man who turned into a woman, would like to return to his original form, but it seems that's not going to happen. Our protagonist ignores everything they told him and tells his companions to start hunting the nearby monsters. He will let those people work in his place while he teleports to another location, claiming that his actions are much more important. After all, he is going to save the entire world, leaving behind a newly formed group of people who don't know each other or trust each other. While all this was happening, the government of the United States of America was trying to take some kind of action. The nation's president was meeting with high-ranking officials to discuss the disasters that were occurring. They need the president to make a decision, but that man Cena can only think of nuclear weapons. Unfortunately, that would mean attacking their own territory. The Secretary of Defense is full of sadness, but cannot disagree. Even if they use all the weapons they currently have, from conventional ones that use gunpowder and projectiles to ballistic ones like intercontinental missiles, next-generation jets, or chemical weapons. As long as that spatial rift remains open, they will be unable to reduce the number of monsters. It was then that the president, visibly angry, realized that there were no other options available. He just wished it were possible to blow up the rifts themselves. And it was then that our boy appeared in the meeting room, saying that he could solve that problem. Since nothing surprises people in this world anymore, the president skipped the introductions and asked who the boy was, delighted to meet him. He introduced himself as the 17-year-old pervert from Korea and future savior of the world. That large conference room was filled with an uncomfortable silence that lasted what seemed like an eternity. The security team reacted immediately, asking who this stranger was, while our protagonist said he had a proposition. But the security guard kept threatening to shoot, while our boy said someone could get hurt. The Secretary of Defense realized that the boy had appeared out of nowhere. He could be a monster, so they had to act quickly. The president asked them to wait, but that moment was already filled with too much tension. And one of the guards fired. He kept shooting until he almost emptied his weapon, but the man couldn't believe what he was seeing with his own eyes. A very popular scene from a 1999 movie was taking place. Our boy had recreated a barrier capable of stopping bullets in physical reality. These things only made him happier, as it is really fun to be able to do all this. After letting the bullets fall to the ground, he asked if the president understood things now, because if he did, he should trust the boy completely. Now that he had everyone's attention, he asked the president to launch all the nuclear weapons. The man knew it was a drastic measure, and he couldn't do something like that without a very solid justification. Skipping the entire negotiation phase, our protagonist used his mass manipulation ability, reaching all the people in that room with his power. All those ordinary men had become his minions, completely subservient. One of them reached the desk phone there. It was the president who took control, passing a code to the military to execute the Neo-Doomsday Protocol. All nuclear weapons were to be launched immediately. The order spread through the chain of command, leaving those responsible for carrying out such an atrocious act absolutely terrified. There was no other option. These men had to do what they were ordered. The first nuclear missile was launched from a submarine hidden somewhere on the planet. Those dangerous weapons cut across the sky. The exact number of them was completely unknown. But at that moment, our protagonist knew that nearly 8,000 missiles had been launched. He was sure this would be enough to solve the problem, as he was using another ability that the invisible hand possessed, materializing a giant human hand made of magic. Using another ability, the boy was replicating the first one he created, sending one of his hands towards the missiles flying through the atmosphere. Each hand had a single order: to grab a missile and make sure none escaped. Little by little, they were captured by our protagonist's hands, and he gave them another order to throw those weapons into the portal. Immediately, the projectiles began to adjust their trajectories. Each one was being directed towards a specific portal. Our protagonist could already taste the victory achieved, thanks to his brilliant strategy. In the Russian capital, other powerful figures had gathered. High-ranking government officials had learned that their rival nation had launched all its nuclear weapons, and, in general, they suggested immediate retaliation. It was then that our protagonist appeared in that place. Saying that there was no need to do such a thing, the guards didn't even ask him who he was. They immediately opened fire on the stranger, forcing the boy to reenact that incredibly popular scene from a certain movie from May 1999, leaving those men terrified, as that should have been completely impossible. In the American command center, they realized that the portals were disappearing. Our boy appeared to say it was his doing, thanking the authorities for trusting him enough to launch all those weapons. It was then that the president realized what had happened and immediately worried about the consequences, until our boy said that the weapons exploded inside the portals, causing no collateral damage. The men instantly began to celebrate the presence of the Korean hero. As he said goodbye, he told them that they should now take care of the monsters that had already escaped through the portals, disappearing as quickly as he had appeared. Back in our protagonist's homeland, his team was still hunting all those creatures. As soon as he arrived, the boy said the team was doing very well. The only one who gave him a warm welcome was the dagger assassin. The warrior woman said she was almost killed several times, and the other one, although it's obvious because she is still upset. She asked if a missile had exploded in the rift and if our protagonist had anything to do with it. and he confirmed it. This boy is still thinking a lot about the composition of his team, realizing that he needs someone to take on the role of a tank, immersed in his own thoughts. He didn't notice the appearance of a pillar of green energy behind him. It was a source of intense light strong enough to blind the eyes. It was a constellation that had come to inspect our protagonist, stating that his actions had shaken the universe, and that the woman, the representative of justice, was coming to Earth to judge him for it. He was not prepared to turn a constellation into a beifu, and apparently, not even the protagonist's team was prepared for the pained expression of that mysterious woman. But since she was wielding a sword and wearing full armor, our protagonist had just found the tank for his team. The team trap can already feel the power coming from this person, a true master. And our protagonist asked her not to do anything. He went straight to the system to ask some questions, because some things were bothering him. He wanted to know what the system had told those constellations, and the system reminded him that he had blocked those entities. It was then that he realized that he had really done it. Approaching the mysterious woman, he told her there had been a big misunderstanding. He didn't mean to be rude, but he was very busy having to save the Earth. The woman said that was exactly the problem. Humanity had not sacrificed enough. It was all our protagonist's fault. He seemed unable to believe those words. Deeply shocked by them, he began to ask if the appearance of the portals and the death of all those innocents were the result of the constellation's actions. The woman did not hesitate to make the truth more palpable. She simply confirmed the responsibility. From here, a long explanation about history and science begins. All living beings in the universe produce energy that the constellation consumes so that they can survive. They call this negentropy. They created this system as a farm. The more intelligent the species, the more energy it produces to strengthen itself. These beings, the constellations, create challenges. Some species emerge stronger, producing even more energy for these entities, while others are completely annihilated, becoming raw material for better prepared species. And our protagonist overcame the challenge alone, preventing humanity from growing as a whole. The entities wanted to control his progress until now, but being blocked caused great concern. So the woman offered to judge him personally. All that explanation to our boy is completely ridiculous, an explanation that makes no sense. He can't believe he wasted time listening to that. The author of this story threw science fiction elements out of nowhere, so he asked the hamburger man to summarize everything he heard in only 3 lines. For those who skip those explanation pages, the fourth wall will be broken here. The entities feed on humanity's energy. They create tests to make themselves stronger. Our boy prevented that from happening. Now he can return to Min's story, recognizing that the entities must be demented beings. The dagger assassin says she cannot forgive people like that, but the traps prevented her from attacking, saying that they are not on the same level as that woman. Intervening is not an option for them. Our protagonist is already using a powerful technique, summoning the void itself, reconfiguring that technique to form a sword. He is now ready to face that woman as she presented herself, revealing that he doesn't like constellations. Unleashing a powerful slash towards her with that sword, definitely more powerful than any of his previous attacks. The woman took a defensive stance, believing she could resist it, which she did effortlessly, with a single movement of her sword. That made our boy thoughtful, because his attack was a negation of existence itself. An attack that was blocked as if nothing. Now the woman is heading towards the transcendent of the earth. Our protagonist states that he is no match for her in battle. Our boy doesn't seem to believe that. He unleashes another even more powerful ability, the Planet Destroyer. The glare of the attack completely illuminates the woman's face, but it fails to push her bangs to the other side, so we can see if she has both eyes. And the powerful energy beam travels into space, leaving a bright trail in its wake. The woman remains intact, but this time she complements the force of that blow. Our protagonist starts to get nervous. He tries to use a combination of abilities to win this challenge, while his opponent started to sigh with disappointment at the situation. The boy said that now they were going to star in an intense action scene, but he didn't notice that one of his hands had been taken. The person responsible was the woman's sword, and apparently she was not asking for ransom. Completely dominated by the woman's strength, everyone was stunned as she told the boy to accept her judgment. The pain he felt now was extremely real, but he decided to continue the combat. Using his technique to rewind time, he would do it as many times as necessary, managing to completely restore the hand he had lost. He was willing to keep going back in time until he defeated that enemy. But something was wrong. The entity in front of him turned out to be completely immune to that kind of manipulation. And our protagonist had to prevent the team trap from attacking the woman. This is undoubtedly a dangerous situation. Our boy is already wondering what the author intends because he can do nothing against that woman. He was already running out of patience, asking our protagonist to accept the judgment once and for all. It was then that the boy asked her what all this was about. She sheathed her sword and summoned another object, showing our protagonist a golden scale, which was the scale of justice. The woman said that certain values would be placed on each side of the scale, and their weight would be measured by the laws of the universe. The lack of interest on our protagonist's face was evident, and the entity realized that he hated explanations. So she decided to show him, in a practical way, the benefits of her existence in this universe, and the danger that he also represents. Both would be weighed on the scale. Now the problem was that our boy hadn't paid attention again and didn't know what each side of the scale meant. None of that mattered. The weights were already placed. The result was that our protagonist's presence in that universe represented a great danger. And the decision of that scale is absolute truth. That's why the entity said it would suppress him. For a moment, the boy was completely speechless until the ball managed a confident smile. He said that if that scale could judge any human problem, he would like one of them to be solved. And the woman said that from a cosmic perspective, humanity's problems are too trivial, and that her name is Juno Renee, but that she will be the constellation of justice for us. That made our protagonist even more confident in the scale's abilities. She couldn't ignore such a request. She asked what kind of values the boy wanted to weigh. His team was already starting to worry, but he assured them that everything would be fine. Since this was going to be fun, he couldn't ignore the idea of a cosmic scale game. He knew exactly what to ask that woman for. A wooden stick reinforced with 99 more. Hello, story. What is more fun? That was so unexpected that the poor entity didn't even know what to say. Unanimous reaction in that place. Our protagonist's team was completely lost. Not even the human hamburger, which had been the most mentally resilient until now, could grasp the idea. A truly idiotic question. The consolation of justice. She still didn't understand what the protagonist had said, but she asked another question. What would be more fun, the guy with the superpower stick or the most famous necromancer in Korea? He was talking about solo leveling. Even the girls in his group didn't know what those stories were, which surprised the protagonist, as they are extremely popular. Because of that, he asked the warrior girl to sell him her brain, as it wasn't being very useful. He realized that he could also erase his own memories using one of his abilities. The human hamburger only asked the constellation of justice to ignore that behavior because the boy was obsessed with bets. The woman said that the scale of justice could not judge trivial things like human emotions, as he had asked. Faced with this limitation, our protagonist stated that the constellation didn't understand much about this world. Here, nothing is more important than fun. Knowing that he now wanted to make her a little dumber and the previously dangerous and hostile atmosphere had completely changed, the boy asked her to confirm if she really worked to maintain universal order. And the constellation of justice confirmed. The consequences of a reality alteration could have unimaginable effects. That made the boy realize that, according to her logic, he should be sacrificed to avoid such consequences. The constellation of justice tried to downplay the seriousness of the situation, while our boy realized that she wanted to carry out small sacrifices for the greater good. And from a cosmic perspective, talking about universal order is incredibly biased. Because from her point of view, it sounds logical, but from a human perspective, it is completely unfair. The constellation of justice realized she was being cornered by the arguments of a sophist, someone who claimed to be more important than the universe itself, but our boy asked her to let the scale decide if his forced sacrifice, from a cosmic perspective, was fair or unfair. She had to weigh these truths on the scale of justice. The constellation did so, as the boy asked, and the plates were perfectly balanced, until one of them became significantly heavier than the other. The warrior girl was worried, not knowing what had happened, until the protagonist assured her that the result was obvious. Still holding the scale, the constellation of justice remained in complete silence, and our protagonist asked her if she still intended to detain someone branded as a danger to the universe. She who is the very representative of justice. The woman said our protagonist was absolutely right, acknowledging the injustice of the situation. Seeing that the woman was no longer going to attack them, the dagger assassin said our protagonist was very smart, while the ultra girls still didn't understand a single thing. But she made sure to invoke for her. Justice depends on perspective. As the constellation seemed deeply lost in thought, the boy asked if he could make a suggestion. If she was worried about his actions, she could watch him, suggesting she stay by his side. It was never his intention to cause this kind of trouble. It bothered him that those entities attacked humanity. If they were superior beings, they should have helped. The constellation of justice recognized that this was a very rational suggestion, promising that she would always stay by his side, watching all this. The trap was in everything, seeing a cosmic being convinced to submit. And the boy had one last question. It was what the constellations did to Earth when they opened those portals. Just for a brief moment, he was speechless, as if he already knew the answer to that question. The result of the scale was too predictable. After all that dialogue, our protagonist couldn't hide his satisfaction. While the constellation of justice remained thoughtful, as if disappointed, she sighed deeply, a gesture that worried the protagonist. Immediately after, the constellation of justice ascended to the heavens, as if she had something very important to resolve. Her flight was as fast as it was short. She was already above the earth and space, using the full extent of her powers. She began to climb the earth. Several creatures were still wandering freely, sowing terror and danger wherever they went. They were quickly hit by the power of that celestial woman. People who had lost all hope witnessed a miracle. The previously dangerous monsters were now consumed by a mysterious energy. That inexplicable event spread throughout the earth. Each of those creatures that did not belong to this world was being annihilated, all thanks to the power of the constellation of justice. Thanks to the immense power she possessed, she was purifying the earth completely. The glow formed in the sky was intense and blinding, and at the same time resembled a flash of hope. The trap realized that the demonic energy of the earth had completely vanished. As soon as the woman reappeared before them, our protagonist praised what she had done, acknowledging that a constellation was incredibly powerful. She felt used by the boy, but he insisted that it was all his imagination. Protecting the earth was now absurdly easy, and there was another great advantage. Our protagonist had gained a reliable and incredibly powerful companion. Her beauty was so striking that all team members, without exception, were shocked. Since she took off her armor, she caused a stir, but the constellation said she did it because she was no longer in combat. Our protagonist couldn't look at her in that outfit for too long, and he used his transformation ability, dressing her in traditional Earth clothing. Once again, realizing how truly impressive she was, she didn't understand why she was wearing something that didn't protect her body. And she started to undress, to our protagonist's despair. He declared that she had to remain dressed no matter what, for the spirit of justice. It was very difficult human behavior to understand. Even the system came to talk to the boy because something needed to be addressed. The other constellations were even more annoyed, assuming that he had tricked the constellation of justice. But that only angered our protagonist more, because he believed that humans were being used in this situation. He decided that he would crush those entities. Before he could do so, the system informed him that the master of the trial tower wished to meet him personally. And the constellation of justice said that many entities believed the tower master should be held responsible for all this, since he granted such a powerful ability without justification. The system said it would guide our boy to the dimension of eternal night, agreeing to go. The boy said he would share some of his thoughts, and the system said he would be transported immediately, which caught the boy off guard as he hadn't prepared himself. He said he had just made several new companions, and it would be a shame to arrive there alone. The trap didn't want to get involved in it. The sandwich man wanted to return to normal, and the dagger assassin had no idea what was going on. It was then that our protagonist said that the system was transporting them all now discreetly, while whispering to the system to hurry up and follow the order, confirming that everyone was being sent, which left the warrior deeply worried. A large pillar of light appeared from the sky, enveloping them all. In the blink of an eye, no one was left on that street. Mortals lived an intense experience with that form of transport, while the constellation of justice went through it effortlessly, until finally everything came to an end. The small group had reached its destination. a completely different dimension covered by a sky full of moons. The protagonist's friends felt nauseous and had no idea where they were. Looking around, our boy supposed it must be the last floor of the Tower of Trials, and a mysterious voice welcomed the constellation of Justice. It was an honor to have someone like her as a guest. The mysterious figure introduced himself to everyone. His name was Tsukas Inujo, the master of the tower, and he was pleased to receive the constellation there, despite the companions he brought, because he did not tolerate the presence of those inferior beings in that sacred place. Revealing a physical constitution similar to that of an abomination, he unleashed all his power, saying he would eliminate those humans. The warrior was terrified, and the human hamburger made a last request. He would have liked to eat a sandwich before dying. Watching everything with a smile on his face was our protagonist saying that they had finally reached this point. This was their first battle against a dungeon boss as a complete team. The Tower Master stood threateningly before the heroes' group. Our boy watched everything unfold before his eyes, unable to hide his great expectation that all this would be fun. The team friends were scared. They didn't think they could face something like that until our protagonist tried to reassure everyone. If they worked together, they would succeed. It was then that the Tower Master grabbed the boy in his hands, asking him how he dared to get there without climbing all the floors. Our protagonist didn't realize that he had just received a beating from the constellation of Justice, and he wasn't looking forward to another beating. Thrown against the floor by the Tower Master, the boy heard him say that he was tired of being insulted, and that now he would explain what the real problem was. The boy was ignorant, arrogant, cunning, stubborn, and self-centered, as well as irresponsible and vulgar. Our protagonist's whole body hurt, and what really bothered him was having to listen to all that explanation. Until the Tower Master said that, above all these things, the boy was completely selfish. He said it while hitting him hard with one of his hands. The energy was so intense that it made our protagonist scream in agony. The Tower Master said he would make the boy experience all the pain he should have felt climbing the tower, making sure he paid for everything. Meanwhile, the protagonist's team watched everything with great concern. With the boy's body in his hand, the dungeon boss apologized to the other living beings, but said that they would have to die. It was then that a mysterious voice declared that only one person would die there, and it would be the dungeon boss. Emerging from the shadows, our beloved trap appeared, surprising the Tower Master with an attack, landing a massive blow to the Tower Master's face. It didn't seem to have any effect, and the creature admitted that, yes, all this seemed very unfair. He immediately imprisoned the trap with his magic, making them scream in pain, praised their resilience. Even without being transcendent, they managed to endure it. It was a pity, but he claimed that the boy was responsible for their death. With the two of them now imprisoned, the Tower Master apologized to the constellation of Justice, saying that he didn't want her to see this side of him. It was then that he asked her if that was the right way to treat the human who had conquered the tower according to the rules he himself had established. The dungeon boss admitted that he was also a being who served the constellations, and since he also served the constellation of anger, he was merely doing his duty. Now our protagonist realized that there was a constellation very interested in him, just not in a good way. Faced with that simple explanation, the constellation of Justice realized that she had a plausible justification. Everyone except the constellation of Justice thought the same at that moment. They were absolutely going to die in that place, until someone said that wouldn't happen. It was our protagonist who seemed tired of being beaten. His body was now glowing with a blue light. A move so surprising that it left the Tower Master incredulous, wanting to know how such an inferior being could escape his authority. Our boy casually recalled the words used to describe him: ignorant and arrogant, and in stories like this, it is natural for the protagonist to counterattack after taking a hit. But he could do anything. He made sure to free his companion. She also didn't know what had happened, and our protagonist asked her not to forget the feeling of almost dying that she had just experienced. Because if she feels like she is dying, it means she absolutely will not die, especially if she reads that word written in red. In the face of all that confidence, the constellation of Justice was even more impressed to see a mere human confronting the Tower Master without problems. The creature admitted that he had underestimated our boy, but claimed that he was still wrong about one thing. The companions he brought to that place were going to die. Seeing his friends being attacked instead, he said that the Tower Master was quite cunning to block the attack. Now the entity is scared, trying to understand how the boy has become so powerful since his strength has increased thousands of times. The time has come for our protagonist to shine. He was born to say these words, revealing to the creature that he had only been using 1.00 of his total power. And we know it. I don't know if you remember, but he had to reduce his own power when he destroyed that creature. Our protagonist is truly insane. He got carried away so much by the received power that he committed some imprudences. That's why he put a big limitation on his true power. Now inside that dimension that is not his own, he has no restriction. The human hamburger watches everything terrified. Our boy said the enemy is too strong, and there is no way his team can take part in this fight. Now, using one of his countless abilities, he launched attacks against the Tower Master, who was pierced as if he were made of paper, while the pain spread through his flesh. The entity felt that something like this should be impossible. Our protagonist said that the entity's stubbornness ended here, and the Tower Master turned to the constellation of justice, saying that something was wrong. The boy's power comes from him. It shouldn't be greater than the source itself. When he was about to ask her for help, the boy, whom he had previously called irresponsible, assaulted him again. After all, an entity millions of years old should clean up its own mess without asking others for help. As our boy reflects on his own words, the entity is in agony, having lost one in his hands, saying that he could not disappear, as his absence would plunge this entire dimension into chaos, threatening the very order of the universe. These wise words moved the constellation of justice, but despite being disturbed, our protagonist cut the Tower Master in 2 pieces, inflicting celestial pain on the creature. His last words to our protagonist were that he would regret this, but he was not taken seriously. In the end, what was left of his body faded like dust. It was then that the constellation of justice realized that she hadn't even seen the blow. And worse, a human had just defeated a cosmic entity. Our protagonist apologized to his team, acknowledging that they must be worried. They all want to return to Earth, and some want to return to their original form. As they were talking, he realized something. Igor said something much more self-centered when he defeated the creature, and that regret would follow him forever. Seeing how much it bothered him, his team felt disappointed until he came face to face again with the system screen. For defeating the Tower Master, his ascension process had begun. He was now on the first stage. The boy supposed this must be some kind of benefit that could be used in battle, and he was already curious to know how many stages there were. It was then that the constellation of justice asked if the deviant knew what he had just done. He had now become an enemy of all the other constellations. The boy answered her question with another, saying he had no choice. If he hadn't won, he would have died. Then he asked her if the constellation of justice really wanted that. Then he said that not all constellations were against him, as he had gained a powerful ally. But the woman replied that she had never said that, recalling what she heard from the Tower Master. She asked to be sent to the constellation of anger and the constellation of justice. He asked her if she intended to fight her. That alone was crazy, and the boy said he would try to resolve things through dialogue. That seemed to please the constellation of justice. While the warrior believed the protagonist was just an idiot, the human hamburger took the opportunity to praise the protagonist's deeds, suggesting they return to Earth and celebrate until the end of days. Nothing had been said yet, but a golden magic circle appeared under all their feet. The protagonist's team was being sent to another dimension. Once again, the transport was too hard for everyone, but since it was at full capacity, our protagonist felt nothing. Finally, they reached the place where the constellation of anger resides. The first impression our protagonist had was that he was completely lost, and the constellation of justice began to explain herself. That was the domain of Yuja Karuna, the constellation of anger. It looked like they were inside a volcano. The place was scorching, and the hamburger cheese was completely melting. The warrior didn't understand why the protagonist was dragging them all to those places, and he said that having his friend's clothes made him stronger, but coming from someone so self-centered. It was hard to believe. However, the dagger assassins seemed to have no defense against those kinds of phrases. He believed every syllable. It was then that a sinister laugh began to fill the air of that place. Sensing imminent danger, the constellation of justice shielded herself with her sword and shield, while the constellation of anger revealed herself, asking why she had brought those insects to her lair. An overwhelming force crashed against them, causing massive destruction. The form of the constellation of anger was that of a middle-aged man in armor. He attacked the constellation of justice while calling her foolish. For the first time, she had to block a truly powerful blow, demonstrating that this constellation before her exerted immense power, until the man casually said that it had been a long time since they had last seen each other, only to be surprised by a punch to the face. It was our enraged protagonist who would not tolerate anyone attacking his friends. Things happen on such an absurd scale in the story that the protagonist's team is constantly in a state of shock, ready to believe what they are seeing. It was then that the constellation of justice asked him if he had forgotten that he should resolve things through dialogue. It seemed our protagonist had been waiting for the first opportunity to use violence. He threw the entity's body far away, crashing it against a wall. Now that he was at full power, he didn't think the constellations posed a big challenge. Worried, the constellation of justice asked him what he had just done, and our protagonist believed he was saving the woman. He revealed that Karuna cannot control her impulses. She tends to use violence to solve everything. At first, the dimension assigned to him was a wonderful place, so beautiful that it could make anyone sigh at its landscapes. But that man was completely incapable of controlling himself, having discovered that planet late in his life. He began to rage, manifesting his anger in that once beautiful place and the planet that was once an oasis. It would be lucky to survive such fury. After destroying everything, the man became even angrier, knowing that he always behaved this way. Now understanding what he was suffering, our protagonist said he was just a fool, and the constellation of anger became even angrier because an insect dared to touch his face. The power coming from his hands was so intense that it melted the stones on the ground. It was then that the constellation of justice realized they were in serious trouble. The dimension of fire was integrated into that man. If his rage erupted, the volcano they were in would also explode, and the lava in that place was made of extremely dangerous material. Our protagonist realized this could be deadly. Totally determined, he set out to calm the man using an ability capable of reaching absolute zero, causing his entire body to be covered in ice, but his technique proved completely ineffective. The man easily broke the ice. Justice said that Karuna was the very embodiment of rage. They couldn't stop him, but what our protagonist wanted to stop was the excessive explanations. Returning to the fight, he managed to match the man's blow with one of his hands. This constellation before him was on a completely different level, far beyond the Tower Master. Anger said he really liked the cold he felt. He had never experienced anything like it before, and it made him furious. Our protagonist had trouble understanding what he was saying, so he used an empathy ability, which was aimed at the embodiment of rage. Little by little, the man felt something changing in his mind. Justice said that could be dangerous, but our protagonist assured her that he was trying to calm him down while connecting their emotions. The embodiment of anger said that no one had ever entered his mind before. It felt good, but it also made him feel even more unstable, watching everything unfold. Justice said that our protagonist would be consumed by fury, but that ability failed to achieve its objective. The constellation looked like a zombie, as if something was wrong. Our protagonist apologized for blocking him and ignoring his messages. He also apologized for throwing the first punch and asked if they could resolve things through dialogue. Dialogue was already heading towards him in the form of a closed fist, while the constellation of anger said that failure did not keep quiet. Our boy managed to defend himself from the attack, but felt deeply offended by being called a failure. After grabbing him by the neck, the constellation of anger said his nehentropy value was too low. Humanity was destined to be annihilated, but the boy had ruined everything. It was then that justice intervened, asking if the gates had really been placed on Earth to exterminate humans, something the angry man confirmed, barely able to stand the situation any longer. Our protagonist was visibly annoyed by the excessive words being spoken. He finally accessed the first stage of his ascension, unleashing a powerful wave of energy towards the man who looked surprised by the sudden attack. That was the planet-destroying blow, and it seemed to be extremely effective. Constellations of cosmic order. None of that mattered to our protagonist, because he had decided to become the greatest protagonist of all the batons ever written. The body of the man who couldn't control his own rage was now drifting through space, trying to understand how such a small insect possessed immense power capable of rivaling someone with over 10 stars. Our boy noticed that the color of his hair and eyes had changed, realizing that it must be the effect of the first stage. While he was distracted, the constellation of anger returned to the battlefield, heading towards our boy like a ballistic missile, furious and determined. He longed to end the life of our protagonist, whom only the excessive exclamation marks in that secondary character's dialogue bubble bothered. He was already tired of so much intensity, blocking the attack with a blow of his own. The attacking constellation of fury was forced to defend itself, realizing that the last blow, and using all that power, still achieved nothing. Meanwhile, our protagonist seemed slightly irritated by the situation, determined to keep unleashing blows, revealing that what really angered him were the exclamation marks. Now was the time to put an end to that conflict. The boy hit the constellation of anger, of fury, saying that the experience should above all be fun. And with that, the cosmic entity had been defeated. Watching all this from the sidelines was the constellation of Justice, who, at that moment, was speechless, because a constellation had just been defeated by human hands. This could mean the collapse of the entire cosmic order of the universe. After being defeated, the entity began to laugh uncontrollably, managed to get up again, renewed, admitting that all this had been very fun, and that he wished our protagonist had appeared sooner. It was then that the boy realized that the boss had entered villain phase 2. Laughter is never a good sign, and the entity revealed that the protagonist's friends were already dead. After hearing this, he looked back deeply worried, realizing that the heat was consuming them all, and that the trap was about to do something dangerous. He hoped he could stop him. Justice said that the greater the man's rage, the more intense the heat became. Seeing that they were distracted, the Herald of Anger suggested not worrying about the insects. They would disappear soon anyway. But that sentence filled our protagonist's heart with rage, and the constellation believed that the fate of humanity was inevitable. Everything was already in motion. The rage virus had spread across the earth. Knowing this, our protagonist worried for the first time during the combat. While the Herald of Anger kept talking, saying that all living beings on Earth must already be infected. They must have surrendered to Magnus, destroying each other. Meanwhile, Justice was doing her best to attend to the wounded. Now it was our protagonist's turn to get angry, showing multiple exclamation marks in his speech bubble. Their battle was getting more intense, and Justice said the volcano would soon explode. Using one of his transport techniques, he declared that they needed to get out of there. Our protagonist's body was trapped in the teleportation, preventing his blow from landing on the Herald of Anger, since everyone had now been transported out of that dimension. In the next second, a massive explosion occurred, but our boy's team was already returning to Earth. Our protagonist is worried about the threat. He heard the need to protect the Earth. Justice remains lost in thought. She knew that the portals on Earth had been placed there to eliminate all of humanity. There is no justice in that kind of behavior. The teleportation glow could already be seen in the sky, and our protagonist team had finally arrived on Earth safe and sound. Our boy started healing his friends while asking if everyone was okay. He apologized for everything that happened, since it was a consequence of his actions, not noticing that someone was approaching him. As soon as he looked to the side, he saw a completely enraged person. He had to dodge the incoming bites. The man attacked like an animal. Apparently, the threat of that entity was real. The people who remained on Earth had been consumed by the madness of rage, and a large number of innocents had been infected. A kind of zombie apocalypse had just begun, the concept of humanity, or what it means to be human. A great psychologist once said that a human is a subject who lives and explores their own existence. Biologically, a human is a mammal of the primate family, belonging to the genus Homo, an animal endowed with great intellect, capable of using language and symbols, and of forming complex societies with diverse structures. But what would happen to humanity if it lost its intelligence and all its cultural functions collapsed? It's hard to say they would still be human. The name for that type of creature is zombie. All this happened because of the rage virus. This explanation came from the hamburger who wanted to know if everyone understood what had just happened. But the team girls still couldn't say what was happening. The warrior was a little further away from the others, being targeted by several infected. Our protagonist appeared to save her. He was not going to allow one of his companions to be hit by that virus. Using electricity as his weapon of choice, our protagonist struck all the creatures, causing their virus-infected bodies to experience another type of pain. After defeating those first infected, our boy realized that the feeling of doing something like that felt really good. Looking back with all this heroic air, he asked if the girl was okay, but the warrior had tears in her eyes. She asked our protagonist if everything was a joke to him. As she angrily approached him, the boy started to say that she was starting to complain again, only to immediately receive a well-deserved slap in the face. He didn't understand what was happening, while his companion asked him once again if he was going crazy. Since everything started happening, they had all been on the verge of death on multiple occasions because of our protagonist. In response, he said he had saved each of them every time, but the girl so furious. She said they should never have been involved at all. While being burned by that suffocating heat, she screamed nonstop that she didn't want to die now. That seeing her parents for the last time. She said our protagonist didn't know how terrifying that was, and he didn't want to go through that again. All for this stupid idea of fun. She just wanted the void to go to hell. Because in the end, they were all just tools for him to show off his skills. And he does everything alone anyway. She asked if our protagonist even knew the meaning of the word companion. All he has done so far is hit people, and she completely disagrees with that idea of fun. Our protagonist simply said that is how it works in these types of stories. But upon hearing that, his companion said it made no sense. If those people were infected by some kind of virus, there must be a way to cure them. At that moment, she was already begging our protagonist to save them all. I really didn't understand. I thought she was furious about the adventures, but in the end, she wanted to save the zombies. Continuing, our protagonist seemed to have something to say. He didn't believe his companion thought he had killed those people. About that, he could guarantee there was a misunderstanding. All he did was paralyze them with electricity. They were all still alive. And as she herself said, there must be a cure. He also doesn't like protagonists who destroy everything in their path, who are criticized for always doing the same thing. Every time he brings up the subject, his team just stares at him without understanding, as they don't know how to break the fourth wall. The boy asked her not to worry, saying he wouldn't go that far in his actions until she warned him that an infected person was approaching. When our boy noticed the presence, his shoulder had already been bitten. His companion screamed in terror, while our protagonist screamed in pain. Unable to understand what was happening, one of his abilities activated in emergency mode, throwing several restraints at the infected like a spider web. Thus, he was neutralized, and our boy realized that it had been risky, as he had been bitten. The warrior worried, thinking he might be infected, but our protagonist said it was nothing. One of his many abilities is called Splendid Healing, a good reason not to worry. But contrary to what he expected, the matrix seemed to worsen. Since traditional healing didn't work, he decided to use a blessed ability. His attempts were in vain. He couldn't heal the wound, and the constellation of justice said there was no choice. The virus is a celestial power, which means the boy can do nothing. He has to cut off his head before the infection takes over him. Our protagonist was scared by those words, until he realized he was actually getting very angry. With the little control he had over his body, he tried to make a justice signal, and not attack. Quite worried about his situation, he clung to the idea of being the protagonist for everything to make sense. He started to think that the story must be going wrong because he was too strong, and that this was a necessary plot twist to balance things out. Understanding all these truths, our protagonist went completely crazy. His cry of rage echoed through the streets, reaching everyone's ears. With no other options, Justice was lamenting what she had to do until the trap prevented her from attacking. She needs to return to normal someday, which is why our protagonist must live. The hamburger firmly supports those words. While she remains undecided, the zombies run wild until Justice asks for a path to be cleared, saying she needs to use her sword. At that moment, the trap asked if that was a challenge. Then the warrior, very reasonably, said there was no time for this. They needed to reach a safe place before things got worse. The human hamburger didn't know how to get through the crowd, but the warrior said it would be fine, asking if the constellation of justice could take him somewhere else, as there might still be a safe place. People from the entire region were infected, but that city's school seemed to be abandoned. They decided to take our protagonist there. The trap asked for space, realizing that our protagonist seemed to be in a state of demonic delirium. She could treat him with her acupuncture, and immediately began sticking needles into the boy's body, which made him vomit a large amount of blood, something unexpected. The human sandwich said that. On top of everything, it was ineffective, Justice said, celestial powers cannot be subdued so easily. Until our protagonist said he felt much better, that the pressure in his head had disappeared. Justice was speechless by all that. While the trap started bragging, she briefly came to her senses, soon feeling herself getting angry again. And one of the things that irritates our protagonist is when the protagonist is tied up and cannot use his own abilities. He immediately closed his eyes to think, trying to find a way to understand the author's intentions. Until he reached an epiphany. He had found the solution. He told everyone that he had understood. Do you know how to overcome this chapter's challenge? Are you sure you are going to die in the next one? For whoever is interested. Now we start chapter 11. Let's see if the boy dies somewhere else in the city. People were fighting the infected. The girl was desperate. Their group had promised to stay together, and now one of them had to stay behind. And the boy revealed that he had been infected before, which is why he was making this sacrifice. Apologizing for his recklessness, he wished everyone the best. The ship left the harbor, leaving the girl even more heartbroken. All this was being watched on a phone screen. It was a series. In that episode, it had just ended. Our protagonist was the one watching it. He found the character's sacrifice very obvious, but still emotional. He decided to give it the highest possible rating, making sure to leave a positive comment. Just like anyone watching this video should, this kind of altruism is not taught in schools. Stories that include the author's personal philosophy are much better than traditional education. The boy kept eating his instant noodles, reflecting on those words, saying that before transforming, he would sacrifice himself for everyone. The warrior didn't understand, and Justice didn't grasp the concept of sacrifice. The protagonist insisted that this was the protagonist's destiny, and the dagger assassin also didn't seem to understand his position. He wanted to know why exactly he would sacrifice himself, since they were all superpowered, and they could handle things on their own. It caught him off guard. He didn't know what to say either, and the warrior quickly realized he was about to start rambling again. She told him they weren't useless and could get through this without his help. It was then that our boy realized this wasn't a self-sacrifice arc. And growth. After all, especially because their group is so powerful that the infected are afraid of all of them. Since all of humanity had been infected, there was no excitement in finding other survivors either. They also agreed that they shouldn't kill any of those people. Taking all that into account, he needed to understand the chapter's premise before losing control again. Until a dreadful sound was heard. It was the dagger assassin's stomach. And the trap commented that the girl was just hungry, as no one had eaten that day. The warrior took the opportunity to say that she was hungry too, even if the situation was so complicated. It was then that everyone's attention turned to the hamburger on the table. Desperate, it tried to beg them not to do this to it. The trap said that emergency food should be sacrificed for a greater good, something it absolutely did not want to do, trying to find a way to survive. The human hamburger asked everyone to follow it, just outside the room. The trap realized it was right. Several hamburger packages were scattered on the floor. Enough for everyone to eat. That had happened before. Our protagonist did it. And the warrior wanted to know how to eat them. They taught him how to open the packages, and he was very surprised to see so much food in that hallway. The dagger assassin was a little worried. She asked the human hamburger if it could use her friends, which deeply offended it, since in fact he was a person who ignored the threat devastating the earth. They decided to stop and eat something. The dagger assassin came from another world, and the trap was caught up in the perspective of rural China. It was the first time they ate a sandwich, a mixture of so many flavors. They were completely delighted. While the others ate, Justice asked our protagonist how he felt, and the boy thanked her for holding him in that chair. She said it wasn't necessary and regretted taking him to that other dimension, because now he would suffer the wrath until the day of his death, feeling great agony in his body. The boy asked what he should do in that situation. It was then that Justice told him she wouldn't let him stay like this. What humans are suffering because of the constellations is not fair, and she wants to do things the right way. Learning her motivation, our boy felt a little more encouraged. Justice asked him to hold on a little longer. There has to be a way to solve this, and they have trusted companions for it. The girls had just entered the room very happily after eating, with their spirits clearly improved. Our protagonist and vigilante was a bit lost in that situation, which further angered our boy. Seeing his friends satisfied irritated him. He lost control again, and Justice had to try hard to keep him restrained in the chair. But it seemed what she was doing was useless. The trap said he had to return to his original form. Since he had transformed, his abilities hadn't been the same. It was very difficult to control his internal energy. As he began to use his powers, he noticed something different. She was sensing an energy, and it wasn't far from her location. It belonged to someone who hadn't been consumed by rage, which was surprising. Given the current state of the Earth, Justice said that was impossible, as the infection had spread to all living organisms. And her senses are never wrong. But the trap completely disagreed, because she had great faith in her own abilities. She was able to sense the exact location of that uninfected person, saying that if Justice paid attention, she would be able to hear that person's breathing. Justice decided to give a chance to what she heard, and was immediately surprised by what she found. The presence of a normal person. It was then that the dagger assassin asked if there were other survivors, only to be corrected by the warrior, who said that the infected were also still alive. Justice felt the person was getting closer, but couldn't understand it. And the dagger assassin said they couldn't hesitate. That person could be in danger, and right in front of them. Our protagonist lost control, once more screaming with all his might. Justice said it was a power that rivaled cosmic existence. They had to hurry, or the deviant would lose control and destroy the Earth. She would stay behind to keep him restrained in the chair. The rest of the team would have to handle this on their own. After jumping through the window, the trap was heading towards this person, while carrying the pet in her arms, the dagger assassin. And the warrior stayed behind, still a little worried. The warrior wasn't sure if it was okay to go alone like that, without any plan. But to her surprise, the trap had many abilities, managing to walk on air as if flying. The human hamburger didn't understand why they were taking him, and the trap told him she brought him because he understood this world very well. And he was easy to carry. Those words touched the hamburger's heart, making it feel needed for the first time. The trap descended to the ground. As they approached their destination, she could sense the peaceful energy of a person in that building, which surprised the hamburger. But while they were there, some infected were approaching them. What worried the hamburger was whether that peaceful person would open the door. After all, the world had changed. Before she could share more of her worries, the trap passed through the infected as if it were nothing, forcing her way into the apartment by breaking the window. Now they were both inside. The hamburger didn't know that entering like that was even a valid option. The apartment seemed empty, and the hamburger wasn't sure if someone really lived there. It was then that the trap said there was someone behind that door. She could hear his calm breathing. She gently forced the doorknob, and both encountered a rather unexpected scene. The hamburger started to get nervous. She didn't know what that could be, but it was clearly the room of someone affiliated with batons. And if you look closely, there are some famous series represented here. The trap asked what all those talismans were. The hamburger said those objects weren't what she thought, but they were equally strange. Under those blankets was the person they were looking for, manifesting energy in one of her hands. The trap was ready to act, but the hamburger asked her to wait a moment, and the girl under the sheet sat up on her own. Apparently, she had just woken up. The poor hamburger had no natural defenses against beautiful women appearing before him. He was immediately enchanted. The trap found him so pitiful that she threw him on the floor. Meanwhile, the new girl started wondering what was going on. A talking hamburger and a martial artist. This kind of thing only happens in a manga. Her reaction was so unexpected that both the hamburger and the trap were speechless. This girl was exactly like the deviant. And the girl kept saying, "This looked like a baton." She had just finished a chapter, and our protagonist was wrong. He was still alive, completely disappointed. The trap asked the hamburger if everyone in this country behaved like this. The girl thought she was dreaming. Seeing that woman in front of her and the talking hamburger, upon introducing herself, she said her name was Lenara. The hamburger realized she was a student at the school, which surprised the girl. The trap asked if they knew each other, and the hamburger said the girl was quite famous. She even had her own nickname at school. He began to recall the days when everything was still normal. Nero was a student who used to sleep during classes. The class representative had been assigned to hand out exams and couldn't believe what she was seeing. She had never seen Nero awake during a class, and yet she got the best grades in everything. The #1 sleepy student, meaning Nero the hamburger, was very upset. She couldn't believe she had slept through the entire course, even skipping classes. It was then that Nero said she loved sleeping. Besides, that day was a holiday, which made everything make sense to the hamburger. That's why the school had been empty. The one who was now upset was the trap of the hell gates that had opened in the world. Monsters were emerging, and the girl had remained asleep the whole time. After hearing all that, Nero was even more impressed. It really sounded like a fairy tale, which made her seem even stranger to everyone. The trap wasted no time and picked her up, saying it was time to go. Nero felt uncomfortable, but then accepted that it must all be a dream, since the trap hadn't yet realized how much she resembled the deviant. They quickly exited through the window, heading towards the school along the way. Nero wouldn't stop asking for help, clearly scared, while the group was being watched by a mysterious figure, who found everything quite interesting. Looking out the window, the warrior realized that the trap had already returned. As soon as she returned to the school, she said she had recovered the uninfected person, and explained the situation on the way. Nero said her heart was pounding, until he realized that everyone present was incredibly beautiful. The warrior is also a student at that school, and she quickly recognized the sleepy student. And the dagger assassin revealed that the deviant's condition is getting much worse. Justice is still able to restrain him, but if the infection continues like this, her only option will be to sacrifice him. Nara felt a little intimidated, hearing them call that boy the deviant. The sandwich asked if she knew him. Nara said yes, but that maybe she wouldn't remember him. They were childhood friends, and it was the deviant who introduced her to comics. The girl still believes all this is nothing more than a dream, but it's a trap. She is wrong. The warrior didn't expect the deviant and the sleepy student to be friends. Injustice asked her why she hadn't been affected by the virus. Nara quickly guessed that it must be Justice, and that she had heard a lot about her along the way. The hamburger was impressed by her mental agility, and the girl seems to have realized other things too, assuming she is the owner of this dream. While everyone repeats to her that this is not a dream, the warrior assumes she was confused. But Nara said she is now sure it is a dream because her crush had appeared in it. A dream made only so the two of them could experience it together. The male protagonist is out of control, and when no one knows what to do, the female protagonist appears. And honestly, it's hard not to agree with her. The warrior had a hard time believing the deviant had an admirer, but she got worried when she saw Nora hugging our protagonist. She asked her to stop immediately, but Nara ignored her. Now she was hugging the deviant. Nara tried to tell him everything was fine. She asked him to remember her. Justice called her a fool, saying this was dangerous and that she didn't know what she was doing, since it wouldn't work. Ignoring their warnings, Nira pressed her fingers against her own eyes. She only did that to make her eyes water to be more convincing, but the warriors saw it. And now they are sure the girl is as crazy as the deviant. Meanwhile, tears rolled down her face, and one of those tears fell towards the protagonist, dripping onto his forehead like a raindrop, causing a completely inexplicable reaction in him. To the surprise of Justice, who thought this could be impossible, it seems Nero's intervention works. The trap cannot make sense of what she is seeing now with her own eyes, while the hamburger feels like it has seen this before. Justice is sure that this is absolutely incredible, and our protagonist, who is out of control now, finally seems to calm down. His eyes begin to open, as if waking from a deep sleep. He was now completely freed from the rage he had been feeling. Nura told everyone this is the correct way to restore sanity to the male protagonist of any story. A sincere hug and the tears of an old friendship. The deviant looked at her trying to understand what had just happened, which made Nura embarrassed. Now she is so shy that she can barely speak. Our boy knows she is the sleepy student, but doesn't understand why she is wearing pajamas. Only now that he realized he wasn't dressed properly, and due to his change in behavior. The dagger assassin got confused. More precisely, she seems jealous. Justice approached the deviant, saying that this girl was the one who healed him. And very curiously, she asked how that happened, wanting to understand how an ordinary girl was able to heal him without any kind of cosmic power. He only remembers the part about the puppets and the childhood friendship. Besides that, for it to work, Nero would have to like her and be in the role of the female protagonist, stating that he is already drawing those strange conclusions. His team realized that he had returned to normal. In any case, the deviant is very grateful for everything they did for him. Assuming Naru might be cold, he puts clothes on her. The girl still believes all this is a dream, although she can't look him in the eye, until she received an invitation from the deviant to join his team as well, because they needed a smart addition to the team. And the deviant has a feeling that she will be very useful. The one who is really worried is Justice, because that girl was able to neutralize the power of a constellation. She could be much more dangerous than the deviant. Now they can return to the main focus. Nara says this dream is too detailed. She thinks she must have watched too many movies before falling asleep. The warrior says once again that everything is real and that the fate of the world is in danger. Finally, it seems Nira has understood everything. Our boy wants to return to that constellation's dimension, but Justice warns him that returning without a plan could lead to the same outcome. The deviant doesn't know what to do. They haven't yet faced an opponent they couldn't defeat. It was then that Nara asked them to explain the situation, since she doesn't know what's going on. This seemed to give our protagonist an idea, since that girl is very smart. She said she would explain everything to her, hoping that Nara could suggest a strategy. A few minutes passed during the explanation. Once she was up to date on everything, the group returned to that constellation's dimension. The enraged man seemed to be waiting for them all, saying he was impressed that they had the courage to return there. Noticing that the number of people had increased, our protagonist said that thanks to that entity, he had already had his fill of frustration in life. He was already sick of it. His confidence seemed to enrage the entity even more, succumbing to its own rage. The constellation furiously charged at our protagonist, ready to strike him. The blow was about to land on our boy's face, but he didn't move, showing a subtle smile as everything happened. A powerful shockwave spread throughout the dimension. The trap had to create a protective barrier to shield her companions. And for the first time since they met, the entity's eyes seemed intrigued. Its blow had hit a powerful shield. It hadn't been able to touch the deviant. All that was done by Justice, who was actively protecting the boy. It was then that the deviant said he would call attention again, leaving the constellation of Wrath. Deeply enraged, aware of Justice's intervention, the Herald of Wrath asked her what she was doing, trying to take down an auxiliary constellation with those insects. Justice said that's not what is happening. She came there to protect him, but in that constellation's mind, none of this made sense, which only angered him further, unleashing more attacks on our protagonist. With Justice's protection, the deviant believed he might have a chance to defeat that constellation, who seemed to enjoy the challenge presented to him. Before attacking this time, he began to accumulate his power, which gathered in the pendant he wore around his neck. Our protagonist realized that was the trigger for his second phase. This had happened before, and last time the deviant got a good beating. The Herald of Wrath wanted to know if the boy really believed he could match the power of a constellation, because he should have prepared to match the power of Wrath itself, not just a constellation. After that generic speech, he attacked with much greater force, forcing our boy to truly defend himself. The dimension they were in was devastated by Wrath, and the force of that blow resonated in space, throwing the deviant's body beyond the atmosphere. Not even Justice's defense could stop it. Looking back, he could see the path of destruction left by the blow. He didn't know the Herald of Wrath was that powerful, capable of destroying her barrier. The man revealed that he hadn't gotten stronger, and asked the insects before him if they thought he had been holding back his wrath all this time, living an entire life that prevented him from enjoying many things which he ended up ruining, or breaking everything, and there was something that angered him more than anything else. He hated his own rage. And it was his responsibility to try to control all that emotion, which is why he had been storing the wrath he felt in that artifact. The pendant he wore around his neck for countless eons, and now it was time to release all that accumulated fury. His body was engulfed by immense power. The constellation was truly threatened. Now the protagonist group watched with concern, but if you look closely, the trap seems to be enjoying it. Several beasts forged from the magma of that planet began to materialize. The Herald of Wrath was finally ready to unleash everything he had, ordering the newly formed creatures to end the lives of those insects. Far away, our boy believed in his companion's potential and was using the first phase of his ascension. He hadn't wanted to use this ability so as not to overload the illustrator with work, but he would use the replication ability, making several units of himself appear in space. The Herald of Wrath was enjoying the battle, saying the insects could try all they wanted, since they are all in danger of extinction this time. Justice won't go easy, and has already defeated the first creature, but they quickly reconstitute using the planet's magma. Realizing that no matter how many he cuts down with his sword, they will keep reappearing. Nira said the plan had already fallen apart. They had to go back immediately. But Justice kept fighting. She knew she had to go back, but there would be no one left to protect them. She hadn't expected the Herald of Wrath to have that kind of power. It was her fault for not knowing all this information. To correct her mistakes, she needed to take a stand in that battle, using her sword to repel the creatures trying to attack her companions, pushing her abilities as the constellation of Justice to the limit. But the creatures kept appearing until one of them emerged behind her. It was then that Justice realized there would be no time to react. Unless the attack was interrupted by an even larger creature, a dragon made of purple energy. That was the Trap's doing, who was also in the battle. She wouldn't let Justice bear the burden of protecting everyone alone. It was then that the celestial entity realized it was not alone. Those enemies had been created by a constellation, and in response to Justice's fear. The Dagger Assassins said they could fight too. Each of them had received a portion of the Deviant's power. They had a chance. Justice was impressed that these life forms had such a strong will to keep living, recognizing that the Herald of Wrath was wrong. Humanity is not what they thought it was. In fact, it is one of the noblest life forms that exist, and Justice granted her protection to those people. Our protagonists, on the other hand, continued to be used as punching bags. The Herald of Wrath said he couldn't hide for much longer. He made all the replicas explode with a solar flare. Although the main body was far away, the Deviant realized how dangerous he was, until he was finally hit by the Herald of Wrath, who wondered why the protagonist hadn't attacked him. Struggling to speak while his throat was being crushed, our boy revealed that he had no intention of fighting him. These words left the constellation completely confused. The Deviant said that constellations cannot die, so fighting is pointless. That's why he is also going to turn this constellation into his companion. Moments before, they had been planning a strategy against that constellation. After hearing everything, Justice realized it made a lot of sense. Nara agreed that it was a very good plan and wanted to hear what the others thought. Trap said they would face a cosmic entity, and the hamburger replied that Justice was also one. Only the Deviant's opinion remained. He disagreed with the strategy. The warrior asked why he disagreed, and the boy began to explain. But turning that person into his companion would only make everything weirder. They are no longer used to characters joining the group. Adding another one would only make things more chaotic, and the readers expect a battle that burns the entire illustration budget. But whenever he brings up that kind of thing, it gets weirder after thinking about it. Trap also disagreed with the plan, given that the enemy is a cruel monster who wants to end humanity. She would only be satisfied after finishing him off with her own hands. But someone said that wouldn't happen. Justice said that humans could never destroy a constellation. The Dagger Assassin suggested that Justice fight instead, but she said that battles between constellations are forbidden. However, if the plan is to turn him into an ally, she promised to lend her strength. Our protagonist, Steitel, opposed the idea, and Eris told him that if he had a better idea, that he should share it. The boy gathered all his mental power to try to devise a plan, acknowledging that perhaps there is no other option. Navi wants to know everything Justice knows about the Herald of Wrath. Returning to the present moment, our protagonist said he would turn him into an ally. Before he could continue with his plan, he was hit once more by the man's hand, but the boy used a mirage ability dodging it. He said he knows the Herald of Wrath is invited by all the other constellations. And the man began to remember things. He heard that he was the brightest star of all, and that very soon he could have become a constellation. The only problem was his innate nature, because he got angry easily. He ended up distancing himself from others. Those kinds of things only managed to anger him more. The King of Constellations said he admired the boy's consistency, naming him the Constellation of Wrath, hoping that he could fulfill his purpose in the natural order of things. It was the first time he felt recognized for something, feeling something good. For the first time in his life, he only got even angrier. Our protagonist said that, since then, he must have been working as a constellation in silence. Furious, the Herald of Wrath didn't like being understood by an insect. The Deviant healed his wounds, while the constellation unleashed its accumulated fury, asking him what he thought of having an ally that doesn't break and doesn't shatter. That proposal truly shook the constellation, but the Deviant hoped his strategy would work, because he was already at his limit. It was the first time the constellation of Wrath heard words like those, and now he would see if that insect could really avoid shattering. While being held by the constellation's hands, the deviant realized the situation was extremely dangerous. He was definitely going to die if anything went wrong. It was then that our boy realized that he had actually thought he might die, and a massive explosion occurred, like stars colliding in space below them. The protagonist team continued to fight the creatures. The dagger assassin was already exhausted and seemed to realize something. Everyone looked up, witnessing with their own eyes the explosion caused by the constellation of Wrath. It had been a long time since the Herald of Wrath released so much fury at once, and it truly gave him a refreshing feeling. The deviant said there was no need to thank him for what he had done. The constellation of Wrath was astonished to hear that the boy was still alive. It was hard to understand how he survived that explosion, and our boy realized it was the plot armor that the protagonist himself wore. Then he told the constellation that he was perfectly fine and that, deep in his heart, he knew he was a good person. The constellation said the boy spoke as if he could truly understand, and the boy asked him if he had really spread the virus with the purpose of exterminating humanity. But after seeing everything with his own eyes, he saw that people were just upset. They weren't harming each other, until they also attacked the infected, and the deviant got infected. It was then that he finally understood everything that was happening, and the origin of the virus was the despair he felt from wanting to find someone who could understand his frustration. He had been doing this alone for a long time, and now all of humanity knew what he had gone through. The deviant admitted that those must have been very difficult moments. On other occasions, he had blamed himself for his personality traits. He wanted to better understand why he was like that. It would be very difficult to have a normal life. He felt he had to change, but it wasn't an easy task, until he realized it wasn't worth wasting time just on that kind of thinking. Recognizing empathy in himself, and that he had already gone through many difficulties in life. Now the constellation could have friends who recognized the work he had done up to that point. That's why he wanted them to be companions. After being hit by the power of that speech, the constellation of Wrath was speechless. He never thought he would feel this way in his life. It made him very furious, and he prepared to attack immediately. The deviant closed his eyes, ready to receive him. He was hit hard by the Herald of Wrath, who said he didn't need that kind of thing. Releasing the rage he felt, he began to hit the boy's body again and again, determined to crush that insect, making him fall to the ground like a meteorite. Justice was extremely worried about the deviant's condition, as behind him was an angry constellation, who didn't like how they had made him feel. While Justice begged him to stop, the dagger assassin was also worried, until the constellation finally realized something. He was unable to remain angry about the situation. Nero approached the deviant to heal his wounds. While saying it was a very classic scene, Justice asked the constellation to look around him. He did as she asked. His eyes were immediately surprised by everything in that scene. The planet that was previously ruled by fire had become a place of peace. He never imagined that place could become cold, and the deviant wanted to know if the constellation would accompany them on this journey. The man had to look at the sky once more, admiring the beauty of that place, until he finally decided to accept the invitation. Approaching him, the deviant said it was the right choice, but that he didn't know what the future held. That's why he counted on his help. But as soon as he touched the body of that constellation, he felt something very cold, and the man sank. Maybe he couldn't join them. Justice realized what was happening and couldn't believe it was possible. Constellations cease to exist when they lose the reason for their existence. Now that he has no objective for his wrath, he is disappearing. Before that happened, he wanted the deviant to receive that pendant. It was his artifact, the Amulet of Wrath, which had stored that emotion for many eons. The constellation believed it would be useful for the journey ahead, but the deviant insisted that he go with them. His body slowly faded, and the constellation apologized for calling his companion an insect. He finally formed an unbreakable bond with someone, only to fade away shortly after. That made him very angry. Then the constellation disappeared, leaving them all alone in that dimension. It was then that Justice's sword moved towards the deviant's neck. He dodged it without understanding what was happening, while Justice said she couldn't let him live. The disappearance of a constellation is a harbinger of the collapse of the universe's order. The boy is a great threat. Trapana tried to stop her, begging Justice to wait, but the woman already had her sword ready. apologizing for what she was about to do. The deviant realized things could get complicated. It was then that a mysterious person appeared in that place, holding Justice's sword with a single finger. Justice knew who that person was. It was the constellation of Fun who had now joined them. Our protagonist was surprised by this appearance, which seemed extremely cartoonish. Justice began to ask what he was doing there, and the constellation of Fun asked everyone to calm down and listen to what he had to say. He couldn't believe the deviant was trying to make Wrath his ally. He congratulated him for obtaining that artifact, but something more important was underway. A royal decree from the king of all constellations, and this group better know what it contained. They must prepare for that person's divine ceremony. Justice seemed very surprised by the news, and the warrior like us had no idea what that divine ceremony could be. In short, he said, the constellation of Fun. The deviant was going to become one too, but he didn't seem happy to hear that, saying that constellations treat humans like ingredients in their recipes. A short while ago, they were on the verge of annihilating them. The constellation of Fun asked him to calm down a bit, saying that not all constellations agreed with those things. In fact, humans had been chosen, which was strange, and he asked if the deviant really wanted to refuse the offer. Something the boy promptly did. He stood firm in his words. The constellation of Fun had already expected him to do something like this, revealing that he had been watching a transcendent being who values fun above all else for some time. There was no way he could ignore something like that, not just him. Other constellations were also very interested in that human's actions. Especially after what happened with the constellation of Wrath, our protagonist didn't like how close he had gotten. And the constellation apologized, saying he was glad the boy was committed to having fun. He said he would try to fix things with the king of constellations, saying the boy had refused the invitation, but that he hoped the boy was prepared, because now all constellations had become his enemies, as well as the 12 houses of the zodiac. The deviant was intrigued by the 12 houses, and Fun explained to him that among the countless constellations, there are stars that shine brighter than the others chosen by the king himself, the 12 most advanced of all. Each of them possesses enough power to end all life in the universe. And now the deviant had made an enemy of 12 of them. Just imagining that situation was terrifying, but Fun noted that one of the 12 houses of the zodiac might have to be excluded, because Justice seemed to have chosen to side with him. It was then that the deviant asked if Justice was one of the 12 houses, and he confirmed her identity. Before receiving the title of Justice, she was known as the House of Libra, the 7th house of the zodiac, revealing the mark on her face. The boy had no idea he had been walking alongside someone so incredible, and he asked if all members of the zodiac had that kind of mark. Fan confirmed that yes, they all had it, but it changed depending on the house. And returning to Justice, Fan said she might lose her position. The woman revealed that it didn't matter, as she valued the maintenance of the universe's order, and she would willingly give up her position to someone worthy. Fan realized that he couldn't even make jokes in that place. Everything was taken too seriously, and the deviant wanted to know if he still had anything to say. So the constellation began to think. He said they were very similar. They both loved to have fun, and he wanted to be entertained now, because he would have done the same for a boy. But another one had gotten excited in that situation and was overflowing with power. Eager for a worthy opponent, Trap launched an attack. Determined to eradicate that constellation, Fun said that the words used against him were very harsh. And that could be scary. Trap was already dangerously close to his prepared attack, but the constellation only made a gesture with his hand. The deviant realized this could be dangerous. The constellation of Fun told him he would show him how it should be done. With a single movement of his fingers, it was enough to stop Trap's attack, proving that this constellation also possesses great power, capable of erasing an entire planet, causing a massive explosion. Justice immediately had to use her teleportation ability to get everyone out of that place. Everyone was successfully evacuated, but the deviant was worried. Justice Trap could have died because of that, but he admitted it could have been a fun death. Facing a stronger opponent, suddenly appearing next to them, the constellation of Fun agreed with those words. He also asked where everyone was going in such a hurry. As expected, humans could be very interesting. Seeing that our protagonist was angry, he asked why, after all. He had saved his life before. It was then that the deviant realized he had almost died fighting the constellation of Wrath. But for some unknown reason, nothing happened, and the constellation said that as long as he protected Fun, he would be protected by him, ensuring they wouldn't be attacked by all the other constellations at once. Because he is Fun and he is also the House of Capricorn, he had one more thing to share, but decided that only the deviant could hear it. Whispering close to his ear, he asked the boy if he didn't find it fun, revealing that he had high expectations for him, handing him something. If he ever wanted to play again, he just had to use that flute. Finally, Fun said goodbye to them all, leaving behind a very confused one. And Deviant, they finally reached the land. Our protagonist group was once again full of uncertainty, but they weren't used to those kinds of trips, which always made them very nauseous. Everything was happening so fast in the story that the Deviant hadn't even had time to mourn the previous scene. Approaching him, Justice apologized for trying to attack him with her sword. He told her there was no need to worry about that, but the woman knew he was going through a lot. She had been arrogant in judging him, saying she would return to the Temple of Constellations to receive instructions. King Trap also wanted to return to normal because he needed to train. Nuru approached the Deviant, asking him what he was going to do now. Before he could say what a hamburger would do, he asked everyone to look in a specific direction. They immediately did so, realizing that life had returned to normal on Earth. There were several workers on the street, repairing the damage caused by the monsters, while the wounded were being treated. The ray infection had truly disappeared, and the hamburger realized that the deviant had saved the world. Our boy finally understood the magnitude of his actions. That group could finally dissolve. The hamburger was surprised when the boy said that everyone could return to their normal lives, despite the title he carried. The deviant hadn't managed to do much alone, and the hamburger wanted to know what title he was talking about. The deviant said that from now on he would do things on his own, which worried the dagger assassin very much. Then he opened his system window, surprising the hamburger. He received a message confirming that he had completed that mission, but our boy became alarmed, because the hamburger could see it too. Returning to the system, he began to complain because he refuses to read messages longer than 4 lines. The message had been shortened. He was being penalized for participating in the eradication of the constellation of Wrath. The deviant hadn't expected something like that. After being notified, the deviant began to ask what kind of penalty it was, and why he would suffer it. He began to think that he might lose his powers or be imprisoned in some kind of space. Prison, or worse, that new doors would open on Earth. The system said that he and his companions were now under supervision. They cannot block constellations and must participate in their trials. A much lighter penalty than expected, and everyone gathered behind him to read it. Very surprised, the deviant hadn't imagined that his companions could also read it. Nero was startled when she realized she was also a member of that team, a fact that was immediately confirmed by the system. Our boy said he would take responsibility and face the challenges alone. His friends didn't have to suffer too, until the system got angry and told him to stop being ridiculous. Thanks to the boy, he was having trouble with the constellations, and he was not his servant. And he was tired of his laziness when reading messages longer than 4 lines. After that verbal beating, the system began to feel a little better. Justice approached to ask a question. She wanted to know if she could also participate in the trials of the other constellations. The system said it also applied to her and asked if she already felt regret, which irritated her. And for overcoming the challenge of the constellation of Wrath, the deviant would receive a reward. After all this, at least one piece of good news. And finally, the system screen disappeared, leaving only the protagonist's companions who were furious. And they wanted answers immediately, trying to apologize to everyone. He told them not to separate. He needed them all together. Trap was already tired of this, considering ending her life personally. While the assassin tried to calm her down, Justice realized the situation was very complicated. They didn't know when the next challenge would arrive, so they could separate. Meanwhile, the hamburger cried, imagining that her life was ruined. It was the warrior's turn to speak. She asked everyone to listen. What she wanted most now was to see her parents, because she was very worried about them. While being comforted by the assassin, Nara suggested they go to her house first. The deviant quickly remembered that he had thought of his own parents at the beginning of everything, but he hadn't thought about anyone else's family. So he agreed to go to hers. As soon as the girl entered her house, she met her mother, who seemed very worried about her absence. A little later, her companions also appeared at the door, asking permission to enter. While the girl's mother called her husband, her father also seemed very worried. He asked if, during all that chaos, these people had kept their daughter safe. Our protagonist took a moment to answer. He said yes, but his companions knew that was only half the truth, since he was also the cause of the problems. Even so, the warrior's father sincerely thanked him, which gave the deviant a real sense of accomplishment. After several minutes, they also told them the whole story. The father said it was hard to believe, but they had seen it with their own eyes. They realized that the boy had saved humanity. He was glad his daughter had such an incredible friend as the deviant. The boy hadn't seen himself like this before, and in the other room, the warrior was handing out clothes. Nara was now much better dressed thanks to the warrior's intervention. The assassin was impressed by the quality of the fabric of this era. While Justice still didn't understand the concept of human clothing, poor Hamburger was practically losing her mind, while our protagonist wondered if the clothes he had made were really that bad. Until the warrior asked if Trap was happy with the clothes she was wearing, responding that she preferred a slow death to having to wear that kind of clothing, reminding everyone, in case they had forgotten, that she is actually a man. The warrior's mother had prepared a meal for everyone, and she called her daughter to help her take the dish out of the oven, something she did with excellent mastery and skill. Leaving the boys in the press, the human Hamburger didn't know she could do that. After going through so much stress, everyone was enjoying a moment of peace. The dining table was being prepared to receive them all. They hadn't expected so many guests, but they managed to prepare a fitting banquet. With the food served, everyone was seated, ready to enjoy the meal, while some were more familiar with everything. Trap didn't know what those utensils were for. The deviant was delighted with the food, while the warrior's father thought he would love to have him as a son-in-law. Poor thing, so innocent. The warrior's mother said it was lasagna, her daughter's favorite recipe, and the daughter made sure to say that she didn't cook it, especially for them. Trap was already convinced by the recipe, saying the warrior could become a professional chef. Mara realized that this woman was the perfect definition of ensundir. And indeed, the warrior had once considered becoming a professional chef when she was younger. The deviant hadn't imagined she had that character. Everyone ate happily, while the human Hamburger watched from a distance, thinking that food probably tastes even better when enjoyed in good company. Finally, the meal was over. Everyone had eaten very well. The deviant praised the culinary skills of the warrior's mother. She was very grateful for the compliment, until someone said it was a bit salty for their taste. Surprisingly, everyone there, Justice and the deviant, were startled. They hadn't noticed the presence of that person. That woman was the constellation of cooking, and despite the criticism, she liked what she had tasted. The deviant asked her why she was appearing in that place, and she said the answer was obvious. She came to show him the spicy taste of trials, thinking a fight could erupt there. The deviant told his future father-in-law to hide, but that constellation said she was not primitive like the others. She was always curious about new flavors, and she already had a challenge for the protagonist team. They would have to cook something delicious capable of satisfying her. The ingredients would have to be found by them and cooked by them. The deviant wondered why he should do what she said, and the constellation replied that everyone there should consider themselves very lucky. If Aram had followed the suggestion of the constellation of fun, humanity would already have been annihilated. Knowing this, the deviant began to suspect that the constellation of fun might be plotting something, while the constellation of cooking said that if they failed, the end would be inevitable. They would have 1 week to prepare, and once ready, they should summon her through the system. And just as she appeared there, she disappeared. The warrior's mother was very confused. She didn't know what had just happened, and her daughter realized that they would have to cook something for the aliens. If they failed, humanity would be doomed. The deviant began to worry. He didn't know how to cook well, and had no idea how to use his powers in that situation. It was then that he began to think about his companions. He told the warrior's parents that they would leave again, and the man realized they were going to save the world once more. Very excited, he said he was counting on the deviant to secure his daughter's future, which left her dumbfounded upon hearing such words. Once outside, they gathered to discuss the plan. The deviant asked if they remembered the first time he summoned the assassin. The warrior still vaguely remembered that event. At that time, he summoned someone who could adapt to the conditions of his dimensions. And now he would do something different, stating that his ability was already in motion. The warrior wondered what he was really planning to do, and the deviant confirmed that they were going to the dimension with the most delicious ingredients of all time, and space transporting them to a place that maxed conditions established by his ability. The deviant once stood in a grass-covered field, looking towards the aligned horizon, trapped beyond it where they had been sent this time, and the little hamburger realized this could be a little dangerous. The protagonist team was now equipped by enormous figures. A very dangerous dragon loomed before them. A new journey had begun. The menacing creature began to wage war on the group that remained united. However, Nara remained the only one scared in these situations. While the others were already used to monsters, the creature's threat was about to become real as it prepared to unleash flames, launching a devastating attack directly at the protagonist team. The deviant realized that he would always end up having to handle complex situations. With his protective barrier, he managed to block the creature's attack. Now it was time to return the favor. He hit the dragon with an attack from his fingers. The result was absolutely devastating because he hadn't controlled his strength. There was no dragon left to use. Trying to fix his mistake, he used his ability to reverse time, returning to the moment when the dragon was still alive. Considering the possibilities, the deviant thought about the creature Tehen. Realizing what had happened, the dragon asked the protagonist to wait a moment and be reasonable, transforming before their eyes into a quick human form. His eyes were serious and deep, and an ass was freed from the hamburger. He noticed that the man's expression did not match the words he had just spoken. His name is Dekaz, and he is already the 14th generation of protectors of this forest. Therefore, he knows that these people came from another world since they seemed dangerous. He had to attack and apologize for it. The pervert didn't expect something so anticlimactic. And the dragon asked if, with all that power, he was supposed to be the hero. The boy immediately confirmed that statement. Imagining that anyone could see that he was destined to be the hero, the dragon was surprised. Wondering if he was the child of the prophecy, all of this happened 5,000 years ago. If he decides to believe it, a story from the Dragon Kingdom. 5 days after the eclipse of the 2 moons, 7 strangers will appear through a pillar of light. But after counting them, the dragon realized there were only 6 people. He clearly ignored the hamburger, while the pervert supposed they would have to defeat some kind of demon king. This surprised the dragon, as those strangers seemed to know the content of the prophecy. Skipping that boring part, our boy asked the dragon what the most delicious food in this world was. Such a sudden change of topic left the dragon not knowing what to answer. After a long explanation, they discover that this continent is called Ojiaguna, and it is home to 4 great delicacies. A legendary flower that blooms once every 1,000 years, capable of increasing vitality and lifespan by 10 years. There is also the lava sea urchin, which caused great wars in the past, the dragon eggs, considered the supreme ingredient by many, and finally, the meat of the paradise rabbit. These are the 4 great delicacies of this land. Knowing he was talking to a dragon, the pervert asked if he could lay some eggs, and the man said that was very rude. Then the pervert suggested summoning them all at once in that place. He immediately used his ability to make those objects appear there, and the dragon tried to stop him. He begged him not to do it under any circumstances, and the pervert asked him what the risk of doing so would be. He explained that the lava urchin lives under the Demon King's castle, under immense pressure. Bringing a creature like that here would cause an instant explosion. The pervert asked about the other ingredients, and the dragon said they weren't rare. Without reason, the flower wouldn't bloom for another 30 years. The rabbits were already extinct, and he would never hand over his own species' eggs to those people. After that outburst, the pervert tried to calm the man down, saying he no longer understood why they wanted those ingredients, since he thought they were supposed to be heroes. The pervert said he would try to save the world in his own way, not expecting the dragon to understand. Although he thanked the dragon for his help, who became thoughtful, he had his side deeply to make sense of his own thoughts, if they really are the people of the prophecy. It is his duty as a dragon to help them fulfill it. He asks them to try to obtain the millennial flower and the lava sea urchin. Where they find the tree that contains these flowers, they could receive help from the elves. As for the lava sea urchin, they will have to search under the Demon King's castle and blindly meet his army during the search with the strength they possess. That could be easy, so he suggested they try to find them first. Our protagonist decided to split his team in 2 to speed up the process. Nara very intrigued. She asked which team the protagonist would join, creating a copy of himself. He confirmed that he would be on both teams. Such an impressive technique that left the dragon astonished. Now they are ready to carry out this task. Those heading to the tree are the pervert, the warrior, the assassin Nura, and the dragon. While the demon king's castle. The team includes the pervert, the human, Trap Hamburger, and Justice. As they headed towards the elven forest, the pervert asked why the dragon wasn't at the demon king's castle, revealing that this enemy is truly terrifying. His protagonist. Note that the man had no facial expressions. Finally, they arrive at their destination, the city of the elves, which guards the world tree. This place is called Southern Hill. Naran is impressed by the city, which is very beautiful, while the pervert imagines it is the famous tree inspired by Norse mythology. As soon as he finished speaking, he noticed several arrows flying towards him. He managed to block them all easily, but his companions got scared. An elf said that humans are full of tricks, and that it was brave of them to come to that place, stating that they would not leave alive. The dragon tried to ask Belder to stop, while the pervert realized that the people operated under a kind of neighborhood watch. It was then that the elf realized he was talking to the forest guardian dragon, who continued by saying that the boy behind him was the one from the prophecy. The elves became alarmed. They found it hard to believe that a human could be the person of the prophecy. Our protagonist was already displeased to see humans reduced to nothing, and the elf continued his insult, saying that it was a pathetic race and that the dragon was clearly wrong. Until the pervert asked if they already knew each other, and the dragon said Veldor was the prince of that people and captain of the guard, holding the highest decision-making power among them. They would have to convince him somehow. But his personality was complicated. Felder said that humans were dirty and stupid. But as soon as he approached that group, his eyes caught something interesting. He was completely lost in the beauty of the assassin, and the elf who had been so arrogant before had now become a slave to his own passion. The protagonist's second group had reached the Demon King's castle. Before that door, the pervert felt the atmosphere was very intense. His heart raced. Those unexpected visitors were already being watched. The Demon King found everything very interesting. Back in the forest, the pervert's team was being warmly welcomed and enjoying a meal that looked very delicious. They were very grateful for the hospitality, but the pervert was not impressed by the dessert. The assassin was enjoying everything she tasted very much, and the elf patiently explained the fruit star to her. The dragon was impressed by so much hospitality. He was sure this moment would be recorded in history, taking the assassin's hands. The elf promised her he would help her fulfill the prophecy, whatever happened. The pervert immediately interposed himself between them, thanking the elf for his words, while shaking his hand very firmly, revealing that they had come to obtain the millennial flower. The elf was already annoyed, asking the pervert to remove his dirty hands from him. As our protagonist began to get irritated by the situation, Naran tried to calm him down, and the prince revealed that they had no flowers left. The next one would bloom in 30 years, until the assassin asked if there was really not a single flower left. It was then that our boy realized that, by intervening with the world tree, it might be possible. That sentence immediately made all the elves very aggressive, forcing the dragon to intervene once more. Asking them to lower their weapons, he warned the humans that all of that was sacred to the elves, so they should be careful what they said. The pervert apologized, revealing that without those flowers, his world would be doomed. The prince already doubted if he was really the hero the prophecy spoke of, and the assassin kindly asked him, asking if there wasn't another way. Now other elves were completely delighted by her beauty, forcing the prince to try to calm down, telling him that the wisest among them, who was also the oldest, might know something. As soon as they met this figure, the old man revealed to them that the flowers no longer existed. It had been 1,000 years since they last bloomed. It was practically impossible that any remained. He recommended that they be patient for the next 30 years if they survived. Until then, they could see the flowers. For our protagonist, that is an impossible time frame. They have a week at most. The old man said that he once drank tea made from the petals of that flower when he was young, and he could still remember the taste as if he had tasted it yesterday. Something truly divine. It was as if the forest itself had personally blessed him. The stored flowers were also incredible, and fresh ones must be even better. Immediately after, the old man began to boast to the humans, saying that he had tasted it, which made the protagonist teamed out whether he really was the wisest. And the old man continued to tell them not to approach the tree, as they still didn't know if they were the chosen ones. He carried a staff made from a branch of the world tree. They should look at it carefully, because in the next 30 years they might have another chance. The one who felt proud of all this was the prince, realizing that his teacher still understood a lot about racial prejudice. And the old man continued to be impertinent, showing his staff to our protagonist. It was then that a child snatched the staff from his hands. The prince became furious at this behavior, while the warrior said he shouldn't have done that. But with that piece of wood in his hand, the pervert was using his uncontrollable growth ability. And what was once a staff had now turned into a full-grown tree, leaving everyone who witnessed it completely astonished. Since the elves loved that tree so much, our protagonist decided to give them another one. The ancient races had no idea how this was possible, and the boy wanted to confirm if it really bloomed once every 1,000 years. Noticing that there were several flowers on this new tree, more flowers than they could count. Finally, the pervert was recognized by everyone as the hero of the prophecy. He had accelerated time within the tower challenge. 1,000 years for that tree was a minor feat. The old man was on his knees, witnessing a legendary event. Even a racist captain was left speechless. Everyone had witnessed a miracle, something only gods could do. At that moment, our protagonist began to wonder how the other team was doing. A fierce battle was underway. Even this human hamburger had been recruited. The demonic creature had a hole in its chest. It had been defeated by something it couldn't even describe, while the hamburger disappointingly said the creature was too weak. As the sandwich boasted, our protagonist agreed that it was really cool. Justice and Trap all watched, feeling deep secondhand embarrassment. The castle doors finally opened. A demon general was on the other side, saying that his guard was strong enough to defeat 10 dragons alone. He was truly impressed with these visitors. He was one of the 4 generals. He explained that the one they had defeated was the weakest among them, while our protagonist said that the hamburger was the weakest in his team. The general was caught off guard. He didn't expect to hear the same words back towards him, and he noticed how confident the boy remained in front of him. But the pervert had already realized he had been frustrated and humiliated. Trap sensed something fun might happen and volunteered to fight, asking the others to step forward. This sent shivers down the protagonist's spine. He ordered her not to say such words lightly, as that amounted to a death sentence. The general called them all fools, detailing that they ignored his presence in that place. He immediately began to attack the protagonist group, but the attack was blocked by Trap. She had realized there was no need to worry about her companions. The general had been defeated. They expected the Demon King to be a slightly bigger challenge. Once inside, they noticed that the interior was very dark. The pervert asked if the next general was already waiting, until he began to hear a very strange sound. A person rattling chains. She said she was grateful to meet them, saying that they had made it to the Demon King's castle, but that this was as far as they would get. She was the chain scythe, but before her face could even form, Trap erased her from existence, revealing that she was already tired of running into such weak opponents. It was also boring that she was dying of boredom. The same could be said for Justice, who was suffering an existential crisis from encountering so many life forms created by constellations. It was then that the pervert realized that only cosmic entities could truly challenge his group, until a new voice appeared, asking him if he really believed that. The protagonist realized something was wrong. The girl who had been defeated was now standing again, just like the 2 demon generals who had already been taken down. A masked demon said that was his power. He was the most powerful of the 4 generals, master of an army of the dead, ordering humans to kneel before his power. The hamburger asked if that was some kind of magic trick, because it looked very ugly, using more than one ability at a time. The pervert acknowledged that this was a problem that needed to be solved, and against this general, he used dimensional banishment, an ability that was also being used on each of his revived minions. The general soon began to beg for mercy, and the pervert wished them peace in the void. Now he believed they could go directly for the lava sea urchin. After all, that was the reason they had come to this castle. After walking a little, the pervert felt bored since they hadn't reached their destination, until they ended up running into the Demon King himself, very enthusiastic. He suggested finishing the enemy quickly. Raro Justice noticed something, asked his companions to wait, and was already armed. While the demon ordered food for everyone in his presence, the overwhelming pressure forced them to kneel, except for Justice, who managed to resist. Sensing that power from the pervert, she wondered who he could be. Meanwhile, Justice felt a sense of familiarity, asking what he was doing in that place. The entity said the answer was very obvious. This was her castle. So of course she was there. This is the constellation of war. Before they entered the Demon King's castle, the dragon was about to explain how the generals were. The pervert interrupted the explanation, saying it would ruin all the fun. And the hamburger assumed the dragon must be impressed by this hero's behavior. So the dragon summarized his advice in one sentence. The Demon King is really very strong. For thousands of years, countless heroes had appeared trying to defeat him, but all of them ended in misfortune. None even came close to victory, even though he is extremely powerful. He never attacked the human domain. Expected behavior from our protagonist, who was already very confident, believing he would manage to defeat him somehow. But back to the present, he now faces a very powerful enemy. And he asked Justice if she knew this person. She said this is the constellation of war, one of the most powerful beings occupying a position among the 12 of the zodiac. It is because of him that fights between constellations are permanently forbidden, which led the pervert to ask why he was acting as the Demon King in this situation. The constellation of war realized he wanted to know the reason. The answer was simpler than expected. He simply likes war. Due to the decision of the Constellation Council, he cannot directly get involved in conflicts to reach another solution, creating a planet where countless factions remain in perpetual conflict. He watches the life forms he created warring among themselves, something that brings him great satisfaction. And from these life forms that went through the terror of war, he managed to extract more energy than any other dimension could produce. He decided to call himself the Demon King to continue administering that dimension. Our protagonist does not like the way some constellations view life. That only irritates him more. He decided that he would eliminate this enemy, whatever the cost, the constellation of war. He doubted that the human was capable of such a thing, but our boy had received a reward for overcoming the challenge of the constellation of anger. He reached the second level of his ascension. Now his hair is blue, and we all know that blue is a powerful color. He can now use a divine ability, and seeing what was unfolding, Justice said the power was too much. But it was too late. Divine judgment had already begun. Several winged beings were created by the protagonist. They flew towards the constellation like lightning, and the entity managed to create a shield to defend itself, preventing the attack from reaching its body, recognizing it as an extremely powerful light attribute, leaving the pervert speechless. It was an impressive feat. Everything except the constellation had been destroyed. Now the weapon that had turned into a shield became a spear in the entity's hands. Rising from the throne, the Demon King said he had been waiting for the arrival of the hero of the prophecy. He was very intrigued when he heard about a human capable of defeating a constellation. Now that person was before him. It was time to test his strength when Justice asked him to stop, stating that at that moment they were undergoing the trial of the constellation of gastronomy, and that he could not interfere in it. And the constellation said she had no intention of interfering, since they were the ones who had entered her domains. While she mentioned this matter, he remembered something and decided to put away his spear. The constellation of Fun had said something about it. He remembered that when they were all gathered, Fun said that everyone was interested in the pervert. They all wanted to put him through trials and challenges to collect the best Nintropia, but no matter how strong he is. If they all attacked at once, he would end up being destroyed, along with humanity, which is why they had to be very fair. They would start with the constellations that showed interest first, and follow that order. He didn't act just because he was first. He asked if anyone had any objection to his words. Given everyone's silence, he was glad the decision had been unanimous. The constellation of war remembered that it ended up at the end of the line. Its member is 389. Justice said they only came there to collect ingredients from that dimension, which surprised the Demon King. As master of that dimension, he could create any kind of thing. News that immediately surprised our protagonist. They said they needed lava sea urchins. And the demon asked how many they needed. The pervert said they needed many. And the constellation immediately began to materialize the creatures in front of them. After doing so, he asked them if they needed anything else. Our boy asked for dragon eggs and paradise rabbits, and a large number of those objects began to appear in that place. Everything was so impressive that the pervert realized that entities much more powerful than he had imagined exist. The constellation of war. He asked them to hurry so he could undergo his trial. Soon our boy stood in front of him deep in thought and with a mischievous smile. He agreed with those words, saying that someday he would return so they could have a proper duel, and that he was grateful for the Demon King's cooperation as they left that place. The constellation wished he wouldn't die during the trials. Our protagonist only asked him to wait, while thinking to himself how lucky he was. Back in the forest, he carefully observed the tree he had created. He was disgusted to have discovered something so delicious. Only now in his life, everyone who tasted those petals agreed that it had been worth living just to experience that moment. If it already tasted so good raw, it must be even better cooked. While everyone was eating excitedly, someone called him. It was the second team that had managed to gather all the necessary elements. Even the rabbit wearing clothes, speaking alone. Our protagonist was impressed that they had succeeded. The dragon wanted to know where he had gotten all those eggs from. And for a brief moment, our protagonist celebrated by performing a very specific handshake himself. He hadn't really expected to gather all those ingredients. Now it was time to become one again. The dragon wasn't sure if the Demon King had really been defeated, and the racist old man said he had always believed in him. After tasting that shell, Trap got very excited, and the hero of the prophecy was cheered by everyone. They believed he had managed to defeat the Demon King, something he actually planned to do very soon. Looking at all those ingredients, the warrior didn't know what to do with them. He looked at the racist old man who claimed not to know any recipes. He only knew the history of his people and racist comments for all races. Becoming the team's cook, a title acquired at an inopportune moment. The warrior felt very pressured. The dragon suggested they meet the best cook in the city. He couldn't be sure, but the royal family's cook had used all those ingredients before. To Justice, that made a lot of sense, and the pervert liked the suggestion. It was time to look for that chef, he said, as he looked at the dragon, who felt intimidated knowing he would have to be the guide. Once again, flying on the creature's back as they carried the acquired ingredients. They headed towards the next city. The pervert got excited upon reaching the royal palace. Inside the city, life continued as usual until a man decided to look at the sky. He didn't know birds could get that big. The strangest thing was that, without any sign of technology, a child said it was an airplane. His father told him that such things only existed in legends, not noticing the dragon approaching. It was then that panic had already spread throughout the city. It wasn't an airplane, nor was it a bird. The huge dragon landed before them, carrying his crew on his back. Responding to the confusion of the people, the pervert said it was a super dragon. After getting off the creature, he asked if the city was the capital of the country. It really looked like another world, and the dragon said that from that moment on, they were on their own. Since he didn't want to meet the king of that nation, he warned that the hero should also be cautious. He was about to say something about the nature of the king, but he remembered that the hero didn't like spoilers, and the warrior realized that he really took that into account. In any case, the dragon said he would understand once they met him. And for all the help they received, the pervert thanked him and hoped to meet him again in the future. The dragon assured him that it was an honor to have helped the hero of the prophecy, telling him that they would surely see each other again. Looking at the man and his son, the pervert asked if they could borrow that wheelbarrow, so they continued their journey, carrying all their belongings. The hamburger announced the hero's arrival in that city, embarrassing the girls to death. The assassin noticed that everyone was looking at them, but she didn't realize the real reason why they were looking at her. Until after causing all that fuss, a group of people caught their attention. They were the classic bandits, demanding the group of heroes' hand over everything they had. He and Nara recognized it as a stereotype, where a group of bandits decides to bother the hero's group. Seeing that they were distracted, the bandit resumed his threats, saying he would also take their lives. The bald man in the group was stunned by the beauty of the assassin, while the dumbest of them said he liked that unique woman in the group. Trap began to release her killing intent, terrifying everyone in the area. The pervert only asked that no lives be lost. Tired of being ignored, the bandit was about to say something, but he didn't notice the attack coming towards him. He and his gang were completely defeated by Trap, who crushed them, leaving a trail of pain behind. She is already tired of this life, thinking of giving up and reincarnating soon. The citizens who witnessed it were astonished to see how quickly the bandits were defeated. One of them said he saw those people riding a dragon and that the hero of the prophecy was there. After that great feat, the people recognized them as the heroes of the prophecy. Now the pervert could really do whatever he wanted, scattering petals from the world tree throughout the city, being even more praised by the townspeople. The news soon reached the royal castle. The informant presented himself before His Majesty, reporting that his self-proclaimed hero, the prophecy, demanded an audience with him, seated on his throne. The king was too absorbed in aiding. He said his request was ridiculous and the hero should be dismissed. The messenger said that the hero's group had brought with them 4 of the world's greatest delicacies. Finally, the king showed more than just signs of curiosity. He also showed real interest. If true, the group should be brought before him immediately. Once inside the room, the pervert asked for permission to enter, hiding his own intentions. The king asked what brought them to that place. The pervert said he wanted to request the help of the royal chef. The royalty agreed, but wanted something in return. They had to hand over all the delicacies they had brought. The pervert hadn't expected such a demand and said it would be very difficult to fulfill. For refusing the king's order, he called his guards, and the advisor tried to say that this was the hero's group. But consumed by greed, he ordered the advisor to remain silent. The guards were already in position to carry out the king's order. The men were to be killed and the women made slaves, loyal to the crown. The guards were ready to engage in combat. Now the pervert understood why the streets were full of poverty. This country was a complete mess. He immediately turned to Trap, asking her not to kill anyone, feeling that she could make him suffer a lot. He actually liked the restraint. The guards furiously charged against the hero's team and unleashing all their power. Trap was ready to face them, while our protagonists said that these guards had chosen the wrong person to serve. They tried to hit her with their swords, but were brutally crushed by the woman's power. The royal guard flew into the air, and the king couldn't believe his elite soldiers had been subdued so easily. After defeating them all, the pervert approached the king, as things had come to this. Maybe he should take the crown for himself, appointing the human hamburger as the new king of that country. The bald king felt completely humiliated, begging for his life, while the hamburger king boasted about his new power. Clearly, this joke was planned, a real hamburger. Negotiations concluded. The pervert demanded the presence of the head chef. The former king ordered his servant to do as requested, watching everything unfold. The pervert realized the situation was desperate, until the messenger brought a very frail man who was the royal chef. Seeing the state he was in, the pervert asked him why he looked like that. The former king said he was lazy and came from poverty, which is why he looked like that. But he valued his skills very much. He could no longer contain his anger. The royal advisor said that the pig who was king exploited the cook without rest, giving him no respite. Furious, the king addressed his advisor, calling him ungrateful, but the pervert had seen enough. He was disgusted by the former king. He was repulsive, and the hamburger king passed sentence. That man was banished to another dimension without understanding what was happening. 2 portals opened above him, and that despicable existence was sent to the absolute void. He tried to beg for mercy, but the portal closed shortly after. The assassin said that a lot of things had just happened, and the pervert added that everything had been very fun. Now only one thing remained to be done. But the cook was extremely exhausted. It was clear that he was not in a condition to work, and the future of humanity depended on this person. That poor servant of the crown was completely exhausted. After waking up, he was terrified, thinking he would be punished by the king in some way. It was then that the pervert began to calm him, assuring him there was no need to be afraid. But as if traumatized, the cook felt he should get back to work quickly. It would be a tragedy if the king went hungry. The pervert told him not to worry, since the tyrant ruling the country no longer existed, and this small hamburger on his shoulder was the new king of the entire nation. The cook was stunned to see a talking hamburger, and the new king already had his first orders, ordering the cook to make something delicious with the ingredients they had gathered. He could hardly believe his eyes, seeing that the rabbits, which he thought were extinct, were right there, and that cart was also full of the world's greatest delicacies. The pervert asked the cook to make something out of all of it. For a brief moment, he hesitated, but the warrior would help him in the kitchen, and the illustrator chose an appropriate image to show he knew how to wear an apron. The two were ready to face this great battle. Onions were chopped like subdued enemies, begging for mercy. The sea urchin sauce was also being prepared, according to someone who had eaten it before. That's not how it's usually done. The dope was also processing the rabbit legs, but the warrior felt sorry for those cute creatures. To use the dragon egg, they needed to break its shell, which once cracked, revealed that it was a normal egg like any other. They were working hard in that kitchen, but the result of their efforts seemed to be something truly remarkable. They already felt accomplished. Finally, the food preparation was finished. In another room, the protagonist group was playing poker. The cook brought them a sample of what he had prepared, and one thing was certain, it was the most delicious recipe on the entire planet. Its mere appearance left the new king and the pervert gaping. It was simply an omelet, completely ordinary. The petals were stir-fried over fire, the rabbit meat was grilled, and everything was wrapped inside an omelet made from a dragon egg dipped in sea urchin sauce. The smell was truly appetizing, although Nura was afraid to try it. The warrior had tasted a little while it was cooking, revealing that the taste was truly divine. Now it was time for the others to approve it too. Trap and the pervert were already prepared to savor the omelet. The first bite reached the protagonist's mouth. The explosion of flavors immediately surprised him. He felt as if he had been dead all this time without knowing, discovering the gift of life. Only after savoring that was his body transported to other dimensions. And there he accessed the true reason why we all exist. The meaning of life was revealed to that child through taste. After such a sublime and beautiful experience, the only thing he could do was cry. Overwhelmed with emotion for having touched paradise with his palate, he felt as if he were in the beautiful Elysian fields, awaiting the glorious eternity that awaited him. A taste both comforting and illuminating. Such was the beauty of that experience that he even forgot that he existed. Because life was simply too beautiful, an ineffable experience translated to him only through that dish. Once again, the boy was moved, because during his journey through that flavor, he encountered a magnificent entity. She took him in her arms like a child, sharing her immense love with the young man. All this happened while he was savoring the omelet. The pervert truly had an experience, acknowledging that it was perfectly delicious. Nara also recognized that it was divine. Everyone who had tasted the omelet was satisfied. All that remained was to thank the cook who had managed to prepare everything. The pervert was finally ready to face the challenge of that constellation. The cook was also very grateful that these people had saved his nation, and he hoped the hero's team could overcome the challenge. After all their work, the pervert gently put the cook to sleep, asking if everyone was ready to return, since they were now going to face the challenge of the constellation of gastronomy. The system, realizing they were ready, would send them to that constellation's dimension. The pervert counts on the warrior's culinary skills, who after all this journey, feel much more secure. They depart for the challenge, while the mysterious man watches the cook sleeping on the floor. The hero's group was sent to a dark dimension, and they cannot see anything at all. The warrior began to feel afraid, and our protagonist used an illumination skill. The only one impressed by this is the constellation, which realizes how fast they were, and she is eager to taste the food they prepared, recognizing that it would be too predictable. Following the advice of the constellation of fun, she prepared something different, surprising everyone on the hero's team, who would undergo a cooking contest. For a moment, they don't understand the circumstances, while the depraved gets angry with the constellation of fun. The entity before them asked if they still remembered the conditions of the challenge. They must prepare a recipe that satisfies her, and they have to gather the ingredients and cook it themselves. These conditions are impossible to change. Before she could continue speaking, she transported other people to that place. Each of them is a representative of their own dimension and will present high-quality dishes of their own. If the protagonist's recipe is not among the best, she will not be satisfied. Nara said this is very unfair, as she is changing the rules, but the depraved already expected something like this, because it would be fun, assuring her that they would prepare the most delicious dish on the planet. And the constellation revealed that she had already been observing one chef in particular, pointing to a man sleeping in that kitchen with a rabbit on his head, knowing that this was the chef who cooked the dish for them. They worried, since he had the ingredients they were going to use. Faced with this difficulty, the depraved asked the system where the ingredients they brought were. Now the warrior also doesn't know what they will do, as that cook is really formidable. A dish that looked like fish jelly was presented as very important in a clam gathering by that cook. According to him, it is even more delicious when accompanied by earth jelly, and the constellation is about to approve it. She tasted the dish without any prejudice, saying it was really delicious to the surprise of the one who made it. Only then did she give her critique, saying it was not cooked perfectly. Since the cook did not pass the challenge, he was extinguished. It's time to try the next dish, and after that harsh sanction, the other cooks became fearful. The Hamburger King realized that the punishment was truly too severe, and the cook, who had a line with the hero team, began to apologize. The constellation said they could not share ingredients under any circumstances, which outraged the protagonist. Nara said that those ingredients were gathered by them, and the cook acknowledged it, regretting not being able to return that kindness. He deeply regretted that things turned out that way. The depraved knows he needs to think of a strategy, since the constellation put them in this situation, and he decided what he was going to tell her while she was busy exterminating another cook. After their ingredients were removed, the depraved said there was nothing they could do, and the entity asked if they were not prepared, granting them a little more time to gather the necessary ingredients. The depraved thought it was a tasteless joke. Meanwhile, the constellation of gastronomy said she would taste their dish once it was complete. Injustice had to calm the protagonist. The warrior suggested resummoning the ingredients, but the constellation would only accept what was gathered in person. Summoning or copying ingredients with magic is like cheating. This makes every attempt by the group increasingly impossible, and they have to devise something to do. Nura suggested using the ability to reverse time, and the depraved confirmed that constellations are immune to that kind of thing. It was then that a wild idea occurred to him. He managed to glimpse the path to victory, revealing to his team that he had an idea, while the constellation of gastronomy continued to taste dishes. Trabato said that sometimes it is good to assert oneself, and that it is very fun to overcome risky conjugated obstacles. Turning to Justice, he said he had a question for her. The dish the constellation of gastronomy was about to taste now was made of minerals. She didn't even bring it to her mouth. She simply annihilated the cook. As time passes, more creatures become extinct. All those cooks seem to have no hope, as none of their creations managed to please the palate of the entity, who began to feel disappointed with them. Quite enthusiastically, she sees that the special cook has prepared his dish, wondering what kind of recipe it is. Assuming it was made with dragon eggs, and the chef said it was the most delicious omelet in the world. A very confident statement, she acknowledged, saying she had only been able to prepare that dish thanks to the efforts of the hero's group. The winner immediately tasted the omelet. For a moment, her face was invaded by an unreadable expression, until she revealed that it was really perfect, and acknowledging that the name of the recipe suited it very well. It really is the most delicious dish on the planet. Saying that the chef is a strong contender for victory, the others, who were still cooking, became desperate. The constellation continued to praise the quality of the recipe, asking where he got those ingredients from. It was then that, full of courage, the chef gave up on continuing the competition. He had not gathered the ingredients by himself, and he could not continue with his conscience like this. Trying to intimidate him, the constellation asked him if he wanted to be extinguished. It was then that the depraved intervened, saying that those ingredients were his, and that no matter what happened, he and his team were going to win this competition, an overconfidence that scared the hamburger. The cope was speechless, while the constellation seemed increasingly intrigued with her. It made no sense to exterminate such a talented chef of hers. After several hours of competition, only 8 of the original 100 candidates remained. But there was still one last team. The representatives of humanity had not yet been subjected to the trial. Approaching them, the constellation asked what happened, since they hadn't even started cooking. The depraved ones said they had done everything. She asked each of the restrictions, and now they had to present their own conditions. The constellation assumed it must be a bluff. If they were afraid of being extinguished, she felt deeply disappointed. It was then that the depraved suddenly asked if she was really the constellation of cooking, and asked her if she was really prepared and qualified to taste tasty food. The woman replied that this was the true reason for her existence, wanting to know why the boy doubted her. She said that extinction was not a suitable punishment for him, that he had to be taught a harsher lesson, declaring that she would hunt humanity, cook them all, and devour them until they were extinguished. Justice was already scared, realizing that the depraved's plan was too bold. and said that there was one condition for her to be allowed to taste the dish they had prepared. That woman would have to give up her status as a constellation and become human. She immediately found it deeply offensive, but the depraved confirmed it with justice. Constellations can voluntarily renounce their status. These immortal beings are incapable of understanding the essence of food. Nature can be very cruel, and tasty rabbits are prey to any larger creature than them. And the depraved said that she could only taste that dish and feel all its flavors if she were human, since that was the very taste of life. This proposal greatly unsettled her team, while the constellation of gastronomy began to smile menacingly, accepting to submit to it, since she had been questioned about whether she really understood the essence of Emil. She would become human for a brief moment, but the conditions of the challenge would remain unchanged. And if he tried to attack her while she was in that state, she would consider it an interference in the challenge, which would end immediately, given that the constellation of justice was present. It would be her duty to issue a fair judgment. The constellation of gastronomy seemed extremely confident, and the warrior asked the depraved if it was really okay to proceed like this. But this was the opportunity she had been waiting for. The woman was bidding farewell to her divine powers, confirming that she would remain mortal for a brief moment. It was then that the boy approached her, saying she looked exhausted. He took advantage of that moment to reverse time, leaving the constellation confused. That ability would not have had any effect, since she was a constellation. But now that she had renounced her powers, nothing prevented her from being affected by that ability. The depraved's plan was being carried out audaciously. Afterwards, they entered the forest, and the constellation asked where they were taking her, to which the depraved replied that she would understand soon. They saw the dragon approaching on the horizon, and it finally arrived. The powerful creature landed threateningly before them, causing the woman to feel genuine fear. The depraved called the creature by its case name, which confused her, as she had no idea how the human knew its name. Nara also realized that, indeed, they had gone back in time. Speaking with the dragon, the depraved asked it to quickly transform into a human. Because the hero of the prophecy had arrived, while the constellation was still scared in her new state. Justice assured her that she would not suffer any harm, which was confirmed by the depraved. He wouldn't allow that to happen, and he asked her if she was really willing to do anything for a good meal. Being the constellation of gastronomy, she assured them she was willing, genuinely interested in discovering human cooking in a deeply threatening tone. Our protagonist asked her to trust him completely, while thinking to himself that she was going to regret it. The constellation was lying on the ground, visibly tired and distressed. She was doing sit-ups, but had no idea what the purpose of that exercise was. The depraved told her to pay attention to her attitude, while the dragon directed her training. The warrior said that she had never done military service, and that they should be grateful to the soldiers who protect the country while they were there talking. She didn't understand what that had to do with cooking, or why she had to do all those chores. It was then that the depraved asked, while she tried to question his orders. The constellation soon deeply regretted her decisions, so she continued to do various physical exercises that pushed her to her limit. Since she no longer had the strength to stand, she let her body rest quietly on the ground. The depraved immediately approached her, asking if she had woken up. That if the food wasn't good, he was already dead and didn't know it, seeing that she now had much more energy. It was time to resume training. He immediately acknowledged that magic can ask her to wait. But her request was ignored. This time, she was hanging from a rope. The only thing holding her in place was the strength of her own hands. She was hanging from the world tree, and once again, she could understand the situation. The depraved ordered her to climb and pick the flowers from that tree. The constellation didn't understand why she had to do that task. It was very dangerous. If she fell, she would almost certainly lose her life, trying to reassure her, just as he had said. That wouldn't happen because they would find a way to save her. The warrior thought this was too much for that constellation, but Trap disagreed. That woman had tried to eliminate them, and seeing her suffer was deeply satisfying. Meanwhile, the constellation continued to struggle to climb the rope, and the depraved realized it would take her a whole day to reach the top. After much effort, the wounded managed to get hold of one of those flowers. Upon tasting it, she immediately realized that it was much more delicious than she had imagined. Finally, after all the suffering she had endured, she experienced a moment of pleasure. But they quickly took a flower from her hands. They would knight it for the dish they were going to prepare. The constellation swore she would kill them, but justice made sure to remind her of the rules. Threatening participants was prohibited. The depraved confirmed that there was still work to be done, and the constellation began to wonder when they would actually cook. In the Demon King's castle, a thunderclap echoed in the sky, and a loud laugh resonated throughout the place. The constellation of war saw what they were doing to the constellation of gastronomy, and she found their situation hilarious. She had become human. As soon as she saw the man sitting on the throne, she wondered what the constellation of war was doing there, and the depraved told her to bow and ask politely. That was something she didn't want to do, and the depraved reminded her of the ingredients that belonged to that individual. The constellation of war wanted this challenge to end quickly to start having fun. Quite scared, the constellation of gastronomy immediately asked for the ingredients that had been given to them. Now our protagonist has said that they had everything necessary for the recipe. It was time to prepare that wonderful dish. That statement filled the constellation with joy. Only then did she realize that she was excited to taste that recipe again. While the depraved was eager to speed up this episode, disappearing from the war constellation's hall, who once alone in his castle, he realized he was already quite bored with nothing to do. They had all gone to the royal palace. The depraved hadn't expected to meet that king again, having to defeat his guards once more. The fool begged for forgiveness and sought his crown on the hamburger's head. A small paradox. Continuing the story, the tyrant was banished to the void. The rest of the task would be the responsibility of the team's warrior, who was an excellent cook. But the constellation seemed disturbed. The warrior had realized it by reaction. As soon as they arrived in the kitchen, they found the cook taking a nap, just like last time. He was completely exhausted from his work, carefully stepping past him. The warrior said she would need to use that kitchen while waiting for the dish. The constellation of gastronomy said she was starving and didn't understand why they were playing games. Finally, the recipe was completed, and the constellation couldn't hide her anticipation. Trying to compose herself, briefly she said she would judge the dish as a human, but she needed to be properly dressed. After going through all that suffering, she guaranteed that if it wasn't delicious, she would regret it. For a brief moment, the warrior felt intimidated, and the constellation asked what dish it was. Before answering, she gently presented the dish. It was a new recipe, the best blasino on the planet. He thought the combination of ingredients would be perfect for the Zena, but the constellation of gastronomy couldn't hear anything. Her hunger was louder. The explanation continued, but for the first time in her entire existence, the constellation was overcome by extreme hunger. She was ready to try it, and the warrior realized that the best dish one could prepare was one that satisfied hunger. Finally, she tasted the first bite, which caused a great reaction throughout her body. Immediately, tears began to fall down her face. That constellation didn't even know what to say. Upon feeling that taste, while she ate, overwhelmed with emotion, the cook woke up and witnessed the scene. He immediately fell in love with the woman he had just met. The depraved asked her what she thought of the taste. She said she felt regret. Her lifespan as a constellation made no sense compared to that completely new taste. It had the same ingredients as the omelet she had tasted before, but the experience was completely different. Recognizing that she finally understood what a real meal was, there was no denying that truth. The warrior asked what had happened to the challenge. The constellation's answer was encouraging. They had been completely approved. Upon receiving the good news, they immediately began to celebrate. The warrior asked if the depraved already knew that this result would be achieved, revealing that it was a gamble, but that he had been thinking about which development would be the most interesting. And he tried to create the best possible flow. Definitely, she didn't understand it, when Nara appeared saying that it was only possible thanks to her. The depraved agreed with that statement, saying that the lasagna he ate at her house was delicious. The skill she had in the kitchen was essential for the depraved to believe in that strategy, and he thanked the warrior for her contribution. The compliment made her very shy, and the depraved noticed something else. Since having overcome that challenge, the system granted him another reward. He could now ascend to Phase 3, but even using that ability, he was still losing his battles. Frustrated, the system told him he could manage on his own, that the boy insisted on returning the reward, telling the hamburger that there is nothing more important than getting stronger. It is still impossible for him to fight on equal terms with the constellations, but he doesn't want to go through these trials eternally. The constellation of gastronomy ate everything they presented her, leaving the cooking fairy satisfied. He asked her if she was still hungry, trying to deny her desires. She said she could eat a little more. It was then that the head cook made his appearance, asking if he could make her a dessert, because he had never seen anyone enjoy a meal like that woman. And as a chef, he felt deeply enchanted by that behavior. The constellation immediately accepted the gesture, and the depraved realized what was happening. Justice said that her constellation companion had worked hard and wanted to know if she would report all this to her king. Before answering, she looked at the cook again, saying she would remain silent. She would remain in that dimension as a human. Justice became worried, saying that the challenge was over and that she should return to her constellation position. But the woman reflected. She wanted to relearn the meaning of cooking. Justice said that if she remained mortal, the balance of the universe might be compromised. But the constellation of gastronomy was already decided, and she approached the warrior to tell her something, handing the girl her artifacts, completely immaculate cutlery. The warrior didn't know if she could accept such a treasure, and the constellation said it was simply a gesture of her gratitude. The girl didn't know what to do with it, and the depraved realized that things had become much more interesting. Justice realized that the constellation of anger had disappeared, and the constellation of gastronomy had abandoned her post. The supervising human was causing great disturbances in the universe. The warrior didn't know how to use those artifacts, so she distributed them among her companions, giving the knife to the assassin, who immediately started having perverse thoughts. All she had left was the golden spoon. The depraved recommended that she keep it so she could get stronger. The hamburger had jumped off the protagonist's shoulder and was approaching the constellation of gastronomy. She gently removed the crown from her own head, saying that if she was going to stay in that place, then she should become the queen of that town. She surely wanted to eat the hamburger while training, but she restrained herself. And he respects that attitude, but he insisted that she is the constellation of gastronomy. She would never eat just anything. Even so, she was very grateful for the gift of hamburgers, even though her pride had been brutally shattered. If she takes on a leadership role in the constellation of the war dimension, she is sure she will learn a lot. After hearing that, the depraved was sure that she didn't know that constellation either. He believes there will soon be another challenge. They have already gone through 2 so far. Nero noticed that in each challenge, the genre of the story changes. The protagonist agreed that he hadn't realized it before, and wondered if the author never gets tired of his work, until Justice announced that there would be no more challenges, as she would try to persuade the Constellation Council, asking everyone to return to their normal lives. Warrior asked if that meant they would no longer be dragged into those dangerous adventures. It was then that Fun appeared, saying that would be very difficult. Her presence in that place surprised everyone, saying that the next constellation was already waiting, and that she would take them to her immediately. Justice tried to ask her to stop, and Fun said the next one was a zodiac constellation, and that they would be quick about it. They were instantly transported from that dimension, leaving the cook behind, and the astronomical constellation. Our protagonist found himself in the middle of a very rainy and cloudy place, getting angry because Pones had abandoned him in such a place, and he had vanished, using one of his skills to protect himself from the rain. He asked if everyone was okay, but the rain had soaked them all. Looking more closely at that place, he realized that it was disgusting and began to wonder which constellation lived there. It was then that Trap said she felt a great slaughter in the shop, something she hadn't perceived in the other constellations. And a mysterious voice answered her that it wasn't that intense. A woman emerged from a puddle of water, saying that for her to overcome their challenge was simply impossible. She finally revealed herself to them, revealing that she belonged to the constellation of Scorpio. Justice immediately recognized that woman. She was also the constellation of Despair. The presence of that constellation significantly changed the gravity of the situation. Justice tried to approach her, saying it was impossible, that those people could not withstand another challenge. But she was ignored. No matter what Justice tried to tell her, she was already decided on what she would do. The Constellation Assembly keeps saying that they must go through challenges to become more powerful. That's why she couldn't wait any longer. The energy she could absorb from these lives was high quality, and she wanted to consume it immediately so as not to abandon her challenge. It was then that they realized the swamp was getting wetter, and the water was rising, while the constellation wanted them to surrender to despair and not overcome her challenge. That was her condition. The depraved said things wouldn't go as she wanted, using his power to prevent them from being swallowed by the water, which caused a massive explosion, and the depraved demanded that the constellation pay attention. He asked what's wrong with these entities that first create life and then want to end it. Definitely, the depraved didn't like those kinds of beings and was already capable of using the third stage of his ascension. He even thought about making her an ally, as the design assigned to her by the illustrator was very good. But that idea was quickly discarded. The constellations seemed to show absolute contempt for life. Before he could use his characteristic finger attack, the constellation stopped him with one of his hands, saying it was impossible for her not to allow something so dangerous to happen within her domains. It was then that the brave realized that she possessed great power and speed. Those belonging to the Zodiac were much stronger, on a completely different level than the Herald of Wrath. If that constellation really wanted to kill him, the protagonist could do little or nothing. Even so, he decided that he would use his tools, and the Constellation of Despair recognized the artifact that once belonged to Wrath that greatly enhanced the protagonist's power. He finally managed to hit her with one of his blows, forcing the constellation to defend herself. The fury in that blow was charged with extremely destructive energy, and furious, marking the planet's atmosphere with devastation. Now that he was in the third phase, he could control that artifact without being consumed by fury. Falling to the ground, desperate, he said it was impossible. A human was not supposed to have that kind of power. Bari determined that the depraved began to believe he could win this fight, moving toward that constellation, determined to end everything that way. It was then that his attack was stopped by the presence of Justice, who said she couldn't handle things that way. The depraved asked her to step aside. If she kept interfering like that, she would be labeled a boring character, and her popularity would drop considerably. Pharaoh Justice insisted that she was trying to protect him and humanity, because if things continued like this, the Constellation Council would eliminate them all. But those words were not enough to change the depraved's mind. After receiving that blow, Despair stood up, saying it was impossible. Humanity could not escape extinction, because that was the decision she had made. Those words deeply scared the protagonist team, who feared that humanity was approaching its end. And looking at the horizon, they saw a huge wave of water approaching like a tsunami. The size of that mass of water was truly overwhelming, and the constellations said they would drown in the swamp of despair, experiencing the worst kind of hopelessness. The depraved realized that his companions were in serious danger. He needed to use a magic barrier before he could launch it. He was surprised by Despair, who attacked him while asking the boy to surrender. Justice tried to calm everyone down, asking them to listen to her guidance. Thanks to the authority of that constellation, as long as they were in this swamp, they would be trapped in an illusion of their deepest suffering, experiencing all kinds of agony one after another. They must not give in to despair. If they could endure everything until the end, they would blindly escape this place. Justice then spoke of the comfort of Despair, saying that the humans she had met were extraordinary beings. Although they could alter the order of the universe, their wisdom and willpower were amazing. They were not as weak as she thought, and they were capable of overcoming this challenge. Justice believed that everyone would be fine, and when she finished her speech, the wave was already upon them. She said, "The most important thing is not to let them break you," and the swamp was immediately swept by all that water. The one from Priya had tried to defend himself with a magic barrier, but he was quickly reached by Justice, who held him in her arms, saying that all his companions would be fine. He needed to stop fighting the swamp, to look Despair in the eyes. Only then could he defeat her. Looking around, he could see all his companions. The depraved said he would leave them in Justice's care. She asked him not to worry, as she would protect everyone else's bodies. As soon as he removed his barrier, the protagonist was swallowed by despair. His consciousness sank into a bottomless lake, sinking faster and faster until he was taken to another place. Completely unconscious, the voice he heard was familiar, a man telling him he had already asked him to go buy bread. But the boy kept sleeping, so he grabbed him by the head and slammed his face against the ground. The depraved woke up without knowing where he was, saying his head hurt. And the man asked him if the idiot still hadn't woken up. Now he had to come with him. That was his classroom, but the depraved didn't feel like he had time traveled. He finally came to the conclusion that maybe this was the despair scenario that Justice had talked about. The man next to him wouldn't stop threatening him, and the depraved realized that it was his former self, the one who suffered at school. So Gideon wondered what the purpose of all this was. because he really didn't know what he was supposed to do in that situation. But he decided that he would live through the illusion, believing that he still had all the powers he had received. Things didn't go as the depraved had imagined. He swore he would have a satisfying moment where he would teach that delinquent a good lesson. But in the end, all he got was a massive, completely one-sided beating. He even tried to use some of his abilities, trying to freeze the bully. But nothing happened, and he looked like a complete idiot, which only made the guy even angrier. None of his attempts worked. The depraved didn't even have any of his usual amulets or any abilities. All he could do was keep taking hits without being able to defend himself. There was only one thing in that situation: despair. While being beaten, he had to endure the comments of that imbecile, who said that if he didn't do as he was told, they would beat him even more. The depraved became thoughtful. Not long ago, he was capable of flying planets with a single finger. He thought all that was fictitious, that it only happened inside his mind, but he began to worry about the others, that they were probably facing similar situations. The portrayal of that imbecile was nowhere near as cruel in real life. It was then that the boy decided he had to gather strength and fight back. He was not going to give in to despair. He would take the opportunity now that the imbecile had his back turned, using his newly acquired hero instincts capable of saving the Earth. Charging at him and furiously, he even managed to land a blow, but it was much less effective than he imagined. The result of his actions only served to further infuriate that figure, who grabbed the depraved by the neck, an unequivocal sign that the beating would not be gentle. The sound of the protagonist's body being hit echoed in the air. His face was completely swollen, almost unrecognizable. If he could do something right now, he would definitely turn that boy into a hamburger patty. Inside the classroom, he couldn't even access the system screen. If he kept taking hits like that, he would surrender to despair. The depraved realized that he needed to learn how to fight. There was no way to do it alone. He needed someone to teach him. The first person that came to mind was the warrior from his team, who had great athletic skills. Even if he didn't learn to fight, he could at least improve his athleticism. He planned to visit her during the break, as soon as he left class. He realized his nose was still bleeding, and in his current state, it was a little embarrassing to talk to someone like that. Before he could talk to her, he saw the girl talking for a moment with the imbecile. He found that level of closeness strange, and the girl didn't seem to like it either. Even if the imbecile didn't notice the obvious, he kept insisting on getting closer to her until the warrior pushed him away, telling him to stay away from her. The imbecile was ready to be even more of an imbecile, but the depraved was already very close to him, managing to jump onto his back, clinging to him like a backpack, telling the imbecile to disappear and stop bothering the girl because he was going out with her. Even the depraved didn't know why he had said that. While they argued, the warrior watched everything thoughtfully, surprised by his behavior. The imbecile couldn't tolerate the depraved's behavior any longer, saying he was asking to die that day. Seeing that things could escalate, the warrior asked them to stop, but the imbecile was ready to throw himself to the ground, slamming the depraved's body against the ground with all his might. An impact strong enough to hurt a normal person. A truly insane move for those who care. Michael Chandler did something similar in the UFC, but still lost the fight against the great Charles Dubronx. After witnessing that violent act, the warrior asked the imbecile if he wanted to end up in a juvenile detention center. He replied that that would never happen because his father was very rich and could cover him whenever necessary. Lying on the ground, the depraved could barely move, realizing that he couldn't escape despair on his own, and that he was starting to hear the degrading comments of those people, while other prey only wanted peace. The imbecile decided to attack him again. It was then that the warrior managed to grab his hand, leaving the imbecile speechless. And with firm words, the girl told him he better stop. He didn't seem to like seeing her defend that weirdo, but the warrior remained very angry, until she asked him if there was something going on between the two of them. While holding his hand tightly, the girl was not going to tolerate that kind of abuse anymore, so she quickly grabbed the guy's hand, executing a well-planned circular move, twisting his wrist enough to cause pain and make him fall to his knees. After he fell, she still managed to land several punches to his face. Meanwhile, the depraved remained on the ground, flirting with his own despair. Everything happened too quickly, and the imbecile was completely taken down by the warrior. As soon as everything was over, the depraved began to get up from the ground, recognizing that what had just happened before his eyes was truly incredible. Then the girl approached the weirdo, asked him if he was okay, because he had hit the back of his head very hard on the ground. The boy didn't know what that word meant, and the warrior explained that he had hit the back of his head. And she wanted to know if he was okay, although it hurt a little, it didn't seem serious. She wanted to know why he had gotten himself into all that, which she could have solved on her own. It was then that the depraved asked her if she knew how to fight. She said she had watched many videos on the internet about special forces, and she started preparing to be a soldier someday, something the depraved would never have imagined of her. The girl continued by saying that although she seemed fine, hitting your head like that, it was always dangerous. Extending her hand to him, she asked if he could get up, because she was going to take him to the infirmary. After that kind gesture, the depraved offered her his hand, and their fingers finally touched. It was then that he realized what was really happening. That imbecile had already gotten up and seemed furious at both of them. Furious, he asked them what kind of relationship they had with each other. Before they could answer, the imbecile assured them that he would not be benevolent to the girl just because she was a woman. He took his role as an imbecile very seriously. That made the depraved worry, even if none of this was real. He thought it was too extreme for the imbecile to try to hit his classmate. And that's exactly what was happening. The imbecile seemed completely out of control, charging at a woman. But the warrior's eyes were filled with a battle-forged coldness. She was not afraid. It was then that a voice called down the hallway, announcing that the teacher was arriving. It was a short time before those two got into a fight that could have become very serious. But after hearing it from the teacher, the imbecile remembered that he was also a coward, so he had to follow his own playbook. Before leaving, he made sure to say that the depraved was going to get a good beating after class, spitting on the boy's head, which angered the warrior even more, who said that besides being an imbecile, that guy was disgusting. He couldn't understand how some people could be such imbeciles, while the depraved said it was fine, since all this was just a big virtual reality. Nothing he was experiencing there was real. Just seeing that girl get angry about something related to him was more than enough. A third person observed that unlikely couple with great interest, revealing a subtle smile on her face. Finally, they reached the infirmary, and the depraved kept insisting that he was fine. After all, he had walked there. Maybe he really was fine, and his eyes didn't look so hurt anymore. She had to get closer to be sure, which slightly unsettled the depraved. She told him to stay there until the teacher arrived. So the depraved lay down on the bed, while the warrior sat next to him, waiting for the teacher to arrive. It was then that he asked her why she hadn't left yet. She said there was no one else to watch him, and if he had a sudden reaction, it could be really bad, and she also didn't feel like going back to class. All that sincerity only made her even cuter in the depraved's eyes. Puba asked once again how she knew how to fight too. The warrior said she didn't want to get into useless conversations with him, knowing that she didn't want to talk. The boy simply thanked her for the help, asking if she wanted to hear something interesting. The depraved and the little imbecile had known each other since childhood, as the protagonist's father worked for the imbecile's father's company. When they were children, they used to play together as if they were friends. Until one day, the depraved began to notice how different they were. It was then that things started to happen. Naturally, one fine day, the depraved bumped into someone, looked back, not understanding what had happened, only to be stared at by a group of juvenile delinquents, his childhood friend among them. But he did nothing about what happened. They had drifted apart without realizing it before he became a loser. In the other's eyes, the two had actually been friends, until the treatment he received from the imbecile got worse to the point of being unbearable. But the truth is that things didn't start badly. It was then that the warrior said she couldn't keep listening to that story, saying he was an idiot and that it was the protagonist's fault. Things ended like that. He disagreed with those words. Some people are strong like her, while others are useless like him. The girl said that was nothing more than nonsense, self-pity. If he wanted to try, he could change things. The depraved said she only spoke like that because she didn't understand. His father's job was also entangled in that dynamic, which is why he felt he couldn't do anything about it. Once again, the girl just called him an idiot. She didn't think that if his father saw the situation, he would really think there was nothing to do, until he let out a deep sigh, realizing he had gone too far in that conversation. It was then that our protagonist asked her for help. At first, the girl didn't understand, and he reminded her that it was she who said things could change if he tried. so he decided to try, asking her to teach him how to fight like a man, a request that left the warrior quite surprised, but somehow relieved. She asked him if the boy really wanted to learn, that she could understand him being interested in learning something. But before the conversation could end, her eyes began to shine with an intense bluish light, and she replied no, leaving the protagonist confused. He began to feel another wave of despair, asking why that was happening, and the girl replied that she had no interest in doing anything in his company. It was then that things started to change again. The bed he was lying on turned into a small swamp. He tried to free himself from it, realizing he couldn't give up. However, something had to be done about this situation. Anything possible with great effort, the boy managed to get up, leaning one of his arms on the bed frame, declaring to his friend that he liked her. Those words left her very confused, and she seemed to snap out of whatever state she was in. The depraved repeated it once more. He said he liked her, but he only dared to say it because he believed none of this was real. Now that things had reached this point, he decided he would bet all his chips. And the girl became even more irritated, saying that the depraved was acting too weird. Getting up, she said she regretted getting involved in his problem with the imbecile, our protagonist sinking deeper and deeper into that small swamp. Before she could leave the room, he shouted a magic word, lasagna. He said that was the dish she made best. Confused, the warrior asked him how he knew that, and he continued listing things he knew about her, that as a child she wanted to be a soldier, but that she also played baseball and knew how to cook very well. The girl enough thought he was a big creep who stalked people, and the depraved could barely answer. One day, he revealed to her that he was actually her boyfriend from the future, a very risky move. But the protagonist felt he had nothing to lose anymore. Those words seemed to fry her processing ability. The girl was unable to say anything. She simply left the room, and our protagonist completely sank into the bed, thinking that he had definitely gone too far. The more he sank, the more he started to wonder if this was really the end, until a hand managed to pull him out of the water, bringing his body back to the surface. Back on the bed, it was his friend, the warrior from his team. Now, wanting her to better explain this whole situation, he said he really did play baseball, and that he liked to cook. Now it was his turn to explain how he knew all that, and what nonsense that was about coming from the future. For a moment, the depraved had to think to understand what was happening, noticing that the girl's hand was still holding his tightly. She seemed embarrassed by the previous confession. Seeing that, their hands remained together. She got annoyed and punched the depraved in the face, but she was the one holding his hand. Just then, the nurse entered. Finding the two students there, she asked them what they were doing, interrupting an interesting punching session. Outside the school, she found out that the part about being from the future and his boyfriend was a lie. But she also found out that they were comrades fighting against creatures from another dimension, and one of those creatures had trapped them in this virtual prison. Now she was sure he was a mentally unstable degenerate who needed treatment, and, frankly, even he agreed that the story was complicated, and the strangest thing of all is that she didn't even seem to notice that he was sinking into that bed. Then he said he wouldn't bother her anymore, but that he really wanted to learn to fight because he had problems with the imbecile. She didn't want to waste time teaching someone so depraved, who once again said that everything he had told her was true, except for the part about coming from the future. That's how he knew things about her personal life, saying he wouldn't lie to her anymore. And she remembered the moment he confessed his feelings to her, wondering if that part was actually true. Besides that, the boy made her realize that the imbecile had tried to hit him before. She couldn't ignore what had happened. She wouldn't allow that guy to provoke her again. Little by little, the girl started to feel more and more embarrassed by all these events. She told herself that she could already beat the imbecile in a fight because there is a clear weight difference between them, and the idiot seems to understand the basics of martial arts. He knows how to throw a punch. A twig like the depraved won't achieve anything in a few hours. It's simply ridiculous, as he has no other option. The boy at least wants to try, especially since she was the one who encouraged him in the first place. If he works hard, he might be able to change things. She apparently doesn't remember saying those words, but the boy knows it happened in the previous chapter. Since she could no longer avoid the situation, she agreed to help him, but Seki was not going to win. After saying that, she calmly approached him, hitting the depraved right in the mouth. The force of the impact threw him to the ground, and the depraved asked her why she did that. The girl said she needed to fix this before the fight started. "It is necessary to create an opening and aim for a vital point," she said. While demanding to crush the crown jewels with her foot, she said they would practice that until class ended. And the depraved realized that was his only option. Finally, the day's classes came to an end. The poor depraved was completely exhausted. That girl's training was as hard as a constellation's trial. He was completely exhausted, and someone approached him. It was the imbecile calling the boy to follow him. The depraved already knew what was going to happen. But this time he had a plan. He remembered what he had trained with her. The girl who asked him why he had been hit, she said the answer was obvious. She suddenly attacked him with an elbow and said that was the point. He was only hit because he didn't expect an attack. If he had been able to anticipate it, he would have dodged it. The same thing would happen when he fought the imbecile. The guy only thought about attacking. He certainly wouldn't expect to be hit first. The depraved needed to act submissive and take the first opportunity to strike. And that's exactly what he was doing in front of the imbecile, who was saying that everything he was about to do now was the depraved's fault, that he shouldn't even try to blame him. Afterward, then he started taking off his jacket, completely distracted because our protagonist hit him right in the crown jewels, causing him the worst pain he could feel. At that moment, the boy managed to find an opening and hit a vital point. Things went as planned, and the imbecile fell to the ground, writhing in pain. While crying, he kept threatening our protagonist even more, but the boy kept watching that scene. Thinking he had acted like a coward, he told his friend that he didn't feel comfortable with that strategy until she asked him if he was really an idiot, or if he was trying hard to be one. He was clearly the weakest in that fight, not to mention the victim in the whole situation. There was, in fact, a coward there, but it wasn't the depraved. Those words seemed to enlighten the boy's mind. Uma now looked at the imbecile, completely defenseless. He barely had the strength to stand. In his upbringing, the depraved had been taught that violence was never a solution. But he was learning that sometimes it is necessary. But once again, he found comfort in the idea that all this was just fiction, saying that he wouldn't let the idiot mess with him again, punching him cleanly in the face. Thanks for watching the video.